Chair, it is now 6:30. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Petaluma Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee for Wednesday, September 6th. Clerk, could you please take roll?
Pamela Osselmeyer,
Here.
Kelly Bond,
Here.
Nicole Camarda,
Here.
Stacy Earl, Adam Garcia,
Here.
Marja Tar,
Present.
Franklin Quint,
Here.
Brian Barnacle,
Here.
Darren McCuson.
Here.
Thank you, Clerk. Before we go to general public comment, I'm going to make known that we're moving the Scannell item first, and then the ATP update will follow in our agenda, so we're switching those items. During general public comment, the public is invited to make comments on items of public interest that are within the committee's subject matter jurisdiction and that are not listed on the current agenda. Public comments are limited up to 3 minutes per person. Depending on the number of persons wishing to address the committee, time will be allocated in equal shares totaling no more than 15 minutes. And I'm sorry, Clerk, did you receive any comments prior to the meeting?
Yes, we received 3 public comments and they have been posted to the agenda prior to the meeting.
Thank you. And Dave Aldrich.
Dave Alden. I'm here this evening, at least for this part of the meeting, representing Petaluma Urban Chat. We are putting on a Urban Chat, or actually Better Cities Film Festival. Showings on September 20th, which is 2 weeks from tonight, and again on September 28th. First showing downtown Petaluma, second showing out at SRJC. It'll be a 90-minute reel of short films on various topics of urban interest, including bicycling, including walkability. I encourage all of you to attend. The city has a block of tickets that they will be distributing. I encourage you to reach out to the city manager and see if you can get your hands on one. I hope to see all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you. And next to Eris Weaver.
Eris Weaver of the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. I was very pleased to see the announcement that the Meridian at Corona project was awarded an Affordable Housing and Sustainable Community Grant. And as we were written in the grant as a sub to do some of the bike-oriented education and stuff, I'm very much looking forward to working with all the partners on that project. So, yay. A couple of other things, some events that are coming up bike related. On September 17th is the Fancy Women Bike Ride, which is an international event started by a friend of mine who's from Izmir, Turkey. And we did a really small one last year in Rona Park, and excited that it's going to be in Petaluma this year. So hope to see folks out at that. We also have coming up in end of September is our first ever big fundraising gala that we'll be giving out several awards. And we have a great auction and a lot of other fun stuff happening there. And then in October, we're holding our first ever Sonoma County Bike Advocacy Summit. That'll be in Santa Rosa to get all of our folks all around the county who are working for better bicycle infrastructure and policy together in one room to share stories and inspiration and learn techniques. So hope to see some of you at least some of those events. Thank you.
Thank you, Eris. Okay, that closes general public comment. And so we will move to public hearings and matters for consideration. I'm sorry, approval of minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, so the minutes will be accepted as presented. And now for public hearings and matters for consideration. We have review and provide feedback on the proposed pedestrian and bicycle components of the Scannell mixed-use development project located at 500 Hopper Street. And that's being presented by Emmanuel Ursu.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you for considering this item this evening. So this is a long-standing project. The applicants are Scannell Properties. They acquired the almost 40-acre parcel just to the west of the riverfront development along the Petaluma River and the McNear Channel. Next slide. So this project is, as I indicated, just west of Riverfront, which is shown on the screen here. Highway 101 is on the right-hand side. Lakeville Street is towards the top of the screen, and the downtown is on the far left off the screen, as is the downtown smart station. Next slide. This shows the project site overlain or set next to the adjacent riverfront development. Just for context, the applicant is proposing, as shown here, 7 blocks starting in the bottom right of the Scannell property is block 1. Blocks 1 and 3 are proposed as for sale residential product duets. Blocks 2 and 4, which are just to the west of that, would be also for sale product. They would be attached residential townhomes with work-live units, or live-work units, I should say, on the north side of Block 4, fronting Hidalgo Street. Block 5 is market rate apartments. Just below that, to the south of that, is a community playfields, 3.5 acres of playfields of open space or community park. Block 6, which is fronts up on Hopper Street, is also market rate apartments. And then Block 7, which is closest to the smart station, is affordable housing proposed. This to the right, to the east, is the riverfront project. The large green space is the active ball fields, the park in riverfront, and then the blue spaces are the single-family residential areas. The peach and orange space are the hotel and future office, and then in the northeast corner, and that kind of yellowish tannish space is where the city has recently approved, and we're in plan check for 50 townhouses. The two kind of oval or crescent spaces around the central green, the oval central green, those spaces, those are 2 vacant lots in contract by Spirit Living. They intend to develop a residential care facility for the elderly on the smaller of the 2 lots, the one on the west side of the central green, and then apartments on the west side of the central green on the larger parcel. In both cases, ground floor uses would be either work-live spaces or commercial spaces, or spaces amenities associated with the residential care facility. Next slide. The general plan land use designation for the site currently is river dependent industrial with a park designated P3 is a designation for a total of a 7-acre park which straddles the riverfront the subject site. Surrounding general plan land use designations are primarily mixed use. Next. This area is part of the Central Petaluma specific plan, and the SMART code applies. The zoning under this SMART code is, again, it's river dependent industrial. And as you can see, the SMART code includes distance to the train station, to the smart station, You can see the half-mile radius, which is up towards the portion of the site that fronts Hopper Street. Next slide, please. The Petaluma River Access and Enhancement Plan shows several trails through the site. There's one along the river shown in the dashed line as a proposed trail. And then the circles are river access points. The applicants do include a small craft floating dock as part of their proposal. There is a kind of a north-south pedestrian connection, proposed connection, that really is kind of between, when looking at this exhibit, it looks like it's close to the boundary between the Riverfront project and the Skinnell project. And then over towards the left side of the site, just kind of to the left of the red arrow, there's a connection to Hopper Street from the river as well. And that's on the portion of the site that fronts Hopper Street. Next slide, please. So this project, when it comes before the city for formal applications, they will need both legislative decisions and quasi-judicial decisions by the city. The legislative decisions are amendment of the general plan land use designation. They intend to change it from the river-dependent industrial to mixed use, and then changing the zoning from river-dependent to T4 and T5, which are the transect zones of the SMART code. There's also civic space along the river that's included in the project. Some of the zoning land use applications that will be required will be a 10 map, site plan, and architectural review. Alternative compliance for the affordable housing that will, as presented or as their conceptual plans show, the 100% of the affordable units would be in one area of the project rather than dispersed throughout the entire development. And that's what the alternative compliance would be for. And then they may require warrants. That's to be determined based on their SPAR submittal. Next. So this project was first submitted back in February of 2020. And at that time, it included, and really the driver for the project at that point was a new headquarters and campus for Amy's Kitchen. It was almost 200,000 square feet of office space. It included 72 affordable apartments and then about 160 single-family lots in a small retail. There was no community park that was included in that proposal. That proposal came actually before this body 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, and then to the Planning Commission for a study session in February of 2022. Based on Planning Commission input, the applicants revised the plan. They submitted this conceptual proposal for Planning Commission consideration, and they included they included market rate apartments rather than the office. So the demand for office changed with COVID. Amy's was no longer part of the project, and then they added some features to the linear park along the river. And expanded the park size. The Planning Commission provided additional feedback. Based on that feedback, they prepared 3 conceptual site alternatives, and they presented those at a community charrette that was held in March of this year. They then crafted a 4th alternative based on the input from the Planning Commission meeting in January and the community input in March, and presented those 4 alternatives to the Planning Commission in July, so just a few months ago. And the council or the Planning Commission selected one of the concepts as their preferred concept. And we'll go to that next. So this was the preferred concept plan that was reviewed by the Planning Commission. There were 3 other concept plans. This is the one that the Planning Commission had strongest preference for. There was some comments regarding this project, particularly related to concerns with potential for cut-through traffic, especially once the southern crossing over the Petaluma River is constructed, which is pretty close in the timeline with this project's development. And so to that end, the applicant made some additional changes to the minor changes, but will have a significant effect on traffic patterns through the area. And as you see in this exhibit, blocks 1, 2, 3, the residential for sale product, they did not include any concepts in terms of what that product would be, whether it's detached single family, whether it would be row homes, townhouses, or any other, concept other than what's shown on this plan. And then they indicated the market rate apartments, which are in the same location as the current proposal, and the park block 4A along the open space buffer along the river and the channel, the McNear. And then in the west corner, top left corner of this exhibit is where the affordable apartment is. Next screen, please. So this is the conceptual plan as it currently stands. So probably the largest, it's been fleshed out a little bit. So they have actual building footprints. Again, these are conceptual building footprints, but it does give us an idea of the direction they're going in. Probably the largest change is the Caulfield extension into the site. So previously it came to a four-way intersection at Hidalgo. Now the proposal is to curve the extension, include a traffic circle or roundabout as shown there, and then connect into the roadway segment that is between the hotel and play fields in the Riverfront project. Another significant change in at least vehicular circulation is the roadway segment between Hidalgo and Guadalupe Street on the west side, or excuse me, the east side of Block 3, between Block 3 and the ball fields in the Riverfront project. That roadway segment is removed and it remains just an EVA and Class 1 trail. Some of the other features that are shown on this plan that kind of fleshed out at the corner of at the 90-degree corner in Hidalgo Street, over between blocks 5 and 6. They have a retail component and a amenity space for the apartments in block 6. And then there's also a public parking area shown there and floating docks kind of dashed in, a little difficult to see, just to the right of the McNear Channel label. The pedestrian features, they have a few classes of trail that they're shown here, and we'll actually let the applicant who's there get into details about their thoughts behind and how they came up with their trail connection or their trail network. But they do have the trail along the linear park, which is along the waterfront of the project. There is a pedestrian and bicycle connection from the linear park over the McNear Channel to the McNear Peninsula. And that's that kind of dashed in line. It's not labeled on this plan, but it's below the McNear Channel label. The trail would connect on the bottom right-hand side of this exhibit. That's the south east side. The trail along the river, it's a Class 1 trail, 14 feet wide, 12 feet with, or 10 feet with 2-foot shoulders. That connects into the Class 1 trail at the Riverfront project. And then they have pedestrian trails and bicycle trails along the roads as shown in the green and blue. Next screen. This exhibit just came in today from the applicant, and it shows their pedestrian connections, various connections throughout the project. So Mr. Williams, Walker Williams, is there this evening, and he can get into details about these pedestrian connections. Next screen, please. So the next series of screens show the roadway segments. So this is our sections. So this is section A, which is through Caulfield Lane. Caulfield Lane is exactly up at the top there. It's 72-foot right-of-way, 12-foot sidewalks on either side with 4-foot tree wells. I'm not sure the spacing on those tree wells, but and then there's 6-foot bike lanes separated from 11-foot travel lanes by a raised buffer, and that's the same on both sides of the street. Next. This is the Veracruz Street segment, so that's the kind of the main north-south street through the project, segment B or section B. This is 69-foot right-of-way with 6-foot sidewalks on either side, 5-foot planter strip. I believe, I don't know if it's, yeah, it is a parkway, not a, as opposed to the prior street section where they had tree wells. This is a planter strip that runs the length of the street, and then a 10-foot wide two-way bicycle track or roadway trail path, a 6-foot buffer, and then 2 10-foot travel lanes, one in each direction, and then parking on one side, on the opposite side of the street, and again the 5-foot parkway strip and sidewalk on the other side. And that is for that section shown in blue, that north-south segment of roadway. Next. Pico Street, shouldn't be a small P on Pico, my mistake. Pico Street is along the easterly boundary of the project site, section C. So currently the way this is laid out project is there's a 10-foot multi-use path separated with a fence and a AC berm from an EVA, an emergency vehicle access roadway. The proposal is to maintain that aspect of the project on the riverfront side, and then on the project side there'd be a 5-foot sidewalk with a 10-foot two 10-foot travel lanes, one in each direction. And that is, I'm not sure if that's along the entire segment. I think that's just on that segment between Guadalupe Street and Bautista Way. I don't think we have a section through the EVA where it's next to the ball fields. And that may not have been developed yet. Next slide. Way is the street that extends from the riverfront project along the linear parkway, and then sort of turns away from the river. And this is a 56.5-foot right-of-way, parking on the development side versus the open space side of the street. 2 10-foot travel lanes. And then there looks like it's a 5-foot parkway with 6-foot sidewalks on each side. Next. And then this is the section for Hidalgo Street. Hidalgo is the street that kind of forms the north boundary of the project. They show 2 sections. So the top section is kind of what the primary section would be. So it's a 64-foot right-of-way. So on the development side of the project, you've got the 12-foot multi-use path, then 8 feet of parking, 2 11-foot travel lanes, and then 11-foot sidewalk with 5-foot tree wells. And then section shows there would be bulb outs that would accommodate trees, And so that's the difference between the top and the bottom section is the bulb outs to put the trees. They don't have a plan view that shows the spacing on that, but I'd imagine it would be every certain number of car lengths between the parking spaces. Next screen, please. This is along Hopper Street, the segment, the one section of the project that fronts Hopper Street. So on the project side, they have looks like it's a 14-foot sidewalk with 4-foot tree wells, then a 6-foot travel lane. I presume that's a bicycle lane, and then two travel lanes, or 4-foot buffer, and then 2 10-foot travel lanes for vehicles, and no sidewalk on the other side of the smart railroad side of the tracks. Next. This is a detail of the roundabout by the project's northeasterly entrance. I can let the applicant and their engineer get into the details of the design of the roundabout. Next. So there are a few discussion points that we'd laid out in the staff report. Sure, there are many other areas that the committee would like to in terms of discuss project. It's just a list of a few questions or points that we thought would be helpful for the commission or the applicant to hear from the committee. Next. So after the committee provides its input, the applicant will, they still have not made a formal submittal to the city. We have just conceptual applications. They'll make a formal submittal. We'll review that submittal to ensure that it is complete. We'll revise the technical reports for the environmental impact report that had been prepared for the initial formal submittal that was submitted back in 2020. The draft environmental impact report will be prepared, circulated for public comment, and then we will have Planning Commission and City Council public hearings on the project. Next. So we respectfully request the committee discuss the project and provide its input for consideration by the applicant and by the Planning Commission. And that concludes my presentation, and available for questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Does the committee have any questions for staff? Marcia?
I have a question. It regards the bridge over to the McNair Park. Is that part of this project? In
The
other
bridge
words-
is.
Go ahead.
Should I answer that question?
I'm the applicant. So my name is Walker Williams. I'm a development manager with Skinnell Properties. So yes, the pedestrian bridge to McNair Park will be part of the project.
And can also, and when you, in that same regard, is there a time frame if you were to get city's okay on this project? Is there a time frame when we could expect to actually see that being constructed?
Yes, it would be concurrently with when we build the riverfront trail. So it would be at the same time as the rest of the project.
That's great, because I oftentimes find myself on Hopper Street, and Hopper Street is not a place that is conducive to walking nor biking. And with all the kids in this town and the kids that hopefully will be living in these kinds of areas, they need full access to everything in a safe manner. And this provides, this gets our kids that are living out here up off Hopper Street and over to the park and in a safer direction to get downtown. So thank you for that.
Agreed. Yes.
Thank you, Marcia. Brian?
Yeah, I've got quite a few questions. First question, on the affordable, there's this big green block in between the affordable housing and the block 6, block 7 and block 6, and I'm wondering what that is. It's like a different color than the others.
Yes, that's a park that's going to separate Block 6 and Block 7. We haven't programmed it yet, but the idea would be that it could be an active park or a passive park, so we could have a sidewalk. As you see, we have an arrow for pedestrian access. So the idea would be you could walk from Hopper Street down to the Riverfront Trail, but it also just provides extra play space or open space for people living in the affordable block or on Block 6.
Okay. Next question. I think it was on the pedestrian connections. There was a lot more. Okay. Yeah, I wish we would have got these slides ahead of time. Probably could have answered a lot of my questions, but I'm going to ask them anyway. Then let's see here. So you said that the bridge was included because in there was a potential. Do you have what does C3 area mean? There's lots of C3 areas around.
Yeah, those are stormwater areas, so they're planned for stormwater detention and bioretention. So it's basically quality and quantity control of stormwater.
Okay. Is there a reason why the retail was located where it is?
Yes, it's there. We're looking at that as kind of the center for the development for visitors to the development, not specifically going to a home. It's nearby the river, so you can actually see the river from Hidalgo Street at that point. And there's a private parking area there as well, kind of adjacent to the retail and what we're hoping would be a restaurant. So we're seeing this as kind of main and main for our development, where a lot of people would be visiting the development who don't live there.
Okay.
So there's not only is it pretty close to the bridge where you can walk across to McNear, but also that's where we're planning our small watercraft boat launch. So kayaks, stand-up paddleboards, that type of thing.
Okay. And then I don't know if I saw it in the staff report, the total number of units and total number of parking spaces.
Yes, so on the fourth attachment, the overall project data, there's a table, but I'll just give it to you. The total number of parking spaces is 655. Those are only private spaces, not on-street spaces. And then the number of total units is 469. That's a combination of single and multifamily and affordable.
Okay. To be clear, in the graphic that we were given, there's an element called the Green Street or Greenway Promenade. That's pedestrian and bicycles.
Correct, yeah. Originally, when we proposed the concept to the Planning Commission on June 27th, it was planned to be a vehicular road, but we heard multiple comments that it would be nice if you could take away the road and just provide it for pedestrian only. So that's what we've done. We've narrowed the right of way and we provided just for pedestrians. We'd like your feedback on that, but if you would like that to also be for a bike path, we could do that as well.
Okay. And then the neighborhood greenway, when I looked at the section on that, it didn't actually look like there was any bike lane on that. Is that what's your definition of a neighborhood greenway, I guess?
Right now, it's mainly just for pedestrian access. So it's definitely going to be at a minimum a 6-foot wide sidewalk, but we could make it larger.
Okay. Then on Veracruz Street and I guess it'd be, I don't know what the other street is there along the one that's sort of walled off. Are those going to be fences fronting that street? Is that the plan on Veracruz, basically?
We haven't gotten that far, but no, we're not planning on putting fences up.
Okay.
But to be clear, we haven't gotten that far in planning.
Got you. Okay. And then I'm just trying to get a sense of where we're at in the planning so we can make sure I'm curtailing my feedback during comments. Then I think you answered the different colors on there. There's like 3 different colors, block 3, block 4. There's like a dark orange, a lighter orange, and then like a tan, but they're not included in the legend. Can you shine some light on what those
sure,
are?
yeah, let me, so block 1 and block 2, you see those are the same colors. Those are mostly duets where they share a common wall. So they're still attached for the most part. I think there's a couple of structures that are separate. For the most part, they're attached, 2-story homes. Then you move over to block 3 and 4, and those are all townhomes. So you can see they share several walls in a contiguous structure.
All right. I'm wondering, is there a reason why they're different colors, I guess? It made me wonder, like, are they different uses? Are they different?
Well, they're different building types. So the duets only have 2 units that share a structure or share a wall. And for the townhomes, those share several, I think 5 for a contiguous building. And then the darker color is a 3-story work-live townhome.
Got you.
So they're different, it's different typologies.
Okay, great. It wasn't on the one where it was the next graphic. It didn't have that
Yeah, sorry about
level
that.
of
That was-
detail.
that was our
That's all
fault.
right. When you say amenity, is that like a community center? What do you mean by amenity building?
It would be an amenity for the apartment, so it would be like a workout facility or something like that. Maybe it could be a community area where you could rent it out or just have it for some sort of public meeting, something like that.
Okay. Is there any planned spaces for daycare, dog parks, things like that, childcare?
We've contemplated a dog park in the Little Peninsula, the area where the bridge is going over to McNear. We've heard some negative feedback on the dog park, but it's definitely open. So we're open to program the park however the city would like.
Okay. And no childcare though?
No planned childcare at the moment. no.
Any community spaces, sort of flexible spaces?
Well, the live work has flexible spaces. So on the bottom, you would have option for some sort of commercial, and then the upper 2 floors would be strictly residential. So
Okay.
those would be zoned appropriately.
So that's all of the stuff on Hidalgo Street there.
Correct. I think there are 11 units that
11
are
units,
live work.
okay.
Those are 3-story live work townhomes.
All right. And then just, it strikes me that the blocks, the neighbors who showed up and said that they didn't want any through traffic going through and stuff really was taken pretty literally. Is there a reason why we really created some sort of suburban mazes there in blocks 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'd say?
2, 3, 4. I don't think I understand the question.
I mean, it's quite literally one way in, right? On block 1 and 3 for sure. There's one entrance point on Veracruz, right?
So
For-
we're anticipating, imagine if you're coming in Caulfield Lane Extension, you go through the roundabout and then you sit at the stop sign. I'm not sure exactly what that street is called, but you're trying to take a right and go over the bridge to the south to downtown area. If that backs up at all, we're expecting people to be cutting through to save time, and we're expecting them to speed. So the idea is to cut that off.
Okay.
And so instead of having that as a through road, it would just be for EVA traffic only.
Okay.
That's the idea behind it.
All right. Thank you for sharing. And then I guess the other thing, the orientation, am I to say that on Veracruz and Bautista Way, those are all going to be backyards sort of facing in? So like it might not be a fence, but those will be backyards? And that the front yards would be the interior portions of those?
Good question. If I could ask KTGY, our architects who are on the call right now, if I could ask them to respond to that. Lily, are you on the call?
I'm here, Walker, Jill.
Oh, hey, Jill. Thank you.
So those are all front doors with front porches facing on to all the surrounding streets. And so the townhomes do have some small private yards a little bit behind. The duets have their little private yards to the alley side. So really, you wouldn't be seeing fencing along the major streets. You'd be looking at all frontages, like I said, with porches, maybe some small patios.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for now.
Thank you, Councilmember Kelly. Darren, go ahead. Rochambeau.
Okay, I'll run through my questions.
So the first of which, how much are you guys harmonizing with Riverfront next door when it comes to class of trails and wayfinding?
So I think our trail will be somewhat of an upgrade. If you look at what's been built next door, it's more of a passive trail where you've got benches and picnic tables. Outside of that, there's really not much to it. So I think that's why this was kind of an advantageous plan that a lot of people liked, is because we want to actively program the 3.5 acres along the riverfront. So we'll be bringing either a dog park, could be a volleyball court, could be a children's park, to the 3.5 acres of open space. But as far as the actual 14 feet of multi-use trail goes, it's going to be very similar. It's going to be an asphalt trail, same width. From what I know, I believe they built a 14-foot wide trail. So it would seamlessly, as far as the actual trail goes, it would seamlessly interact with Riverfront.
And then for signage and wayfinding, are you communicating with their team, or do you have any indications what they're using and how you could kind of fall into line? Just it would be nice if those are similar across the sites.
Definitely agree. Yeah. So even though we haven't developed a cross section for Pico, as far as like what that's going to look like with the fencing, we do know what they've used, and we have talked to their engineering team, so we know what that material is. So we could either match it or do something very close to it.
Okay, great. And then you got to two of my other questions. First of which was benches, pedestrian benches, especially I think along that outer class 1 trail. Even some kind of benches facing the river would be nice. Have you guys thought about that at all? I know there's city requirements. I think it's every 200 feet. Mm-hmm. How has that shown up in the plans for you guys?
Yeah, so you'll see if you look on the south side of the trail, we're trying to keep that natural, and that's intentional. At one point in the plan, we had that as a new programmed park, and we heard feedback from Planning Commission that needed to stay as natural as possible. So we're not impacting anything south of the trail at this point. So everything north of the trail is what we plan to build that's new. And yes, we would like to put some sort of network of benches, picnic tables, and even something like fitness equipment that would attract people to the trail. And so you could periodically stop and eat or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, and I appreciate that responsiveness through the Planning Commission process. I see a lot of that showing up here. And then do we have any idea of tree planting plans so far? Because I love the bulb outs on Hidalgo. I love giving space for more trees, bigger trees, more shade. Mm-hmm. I think that's something, that really would help our bike and pedestrian network, is looking at canopy coverage to make it more usable. Mm-hmm. So right now, do you have any sense of tree species you're planning on, how that fits with the current tree wells? I know for sycamores, things like that, 4 feet might be doable. I think 6 feet is kind of prescribed. I know that's tough given street design. So any idea about what species we're looking at? So
if anybody on the call knows that, please speak up. I don't think we've gotten that point yet, but I will say, as far as the tree wells go, in the SMART code, it's listed that 4 feet wide is kind of the standard. And we've tried to up that to 5 or 6 feet, depending on the location. So we're contemplating, how to keep those trees as healthy as possible. But as far as the actual species, I don't think we've gotten there yet.
And I'll just throw in, and I did see that. I did see 5 feet showing up, the 8 foot bulb outs. I think if there's anything to do on Hopper Street to expand that, I think having some of the big shade trees on Hopper would be great, just for beautifying that area as a great entrance piece. And then really quick, I'm going to try not to get into commentary. I know I want to answer staff's questions. Try not to get into commentary here. Surfaces, you said asphalt surface. I always like to proclaim we need more permeable, but I know sometimes with water management, we don't want a ton of permeable. So if you have a percentage or any rough thoughts you guys have had on materials, what are we looking at in terms of permeable surface versus non?
Yeah, I don't have a percentage. So Julia, if you're on the call from CSW, I'd love this. Just briefly before you get on, Julia, I know we're trying to put in permeable where we can. So I think that's mainly alleyways and parking spaces. But Julia, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Walker. Good evening, everyone. I'm Julia Harbison with CSW ST2. I'm working with Scannell here as an engineer. And We have been looking specifically within like blocks 1, 2, 3, and 4, developing a pervious pavement section that would both support truckloads, as we have to be able to permit fire trucks to go in there. So we don't have a specific percentage, but it wouldn't be within the public rights of way, just because we don't want to have to put that on the city for maintenance.
And then with the Class 1 shared multi-use, is there any option for permeable there, or is asphalt prescribed based on, the class or some other factor about the site?
Specifically, you mean the creek trail?
Yeah, the creek trail, and then potentially the trail along Hidalgo as well.
Well, at this point, we have really just been looking at the asphalt to continue the continuity with the adjacent development. Additionally, it's a little bit more armored and, longer lasting than some of these permeable systems. Now, along Hidalgo, we've been looking at it basically like a Class 1 made out of concrete in a sidewalk fashion, partly to continue to keep the street feel to it. But we can certainly look at something else. I don't know that from a permeability and a long-term maintenance perspective, if that would be preferred in that location.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, I'm usually a proponent of it, but I know there's a lot of complexity that goes into using permeable surfaces. I think along the river, just taking a look at the water engineering of that, whether it makes sense to have more infiltration there instead of running off potentially into the river, and some of those other considerations, I think is worthwhile.
Well, I will say, I know, Julia, we've had this conversation. So when you get that close to the river, running off into the river is actually fine. It doesn't really impact anything, because typically if it rains for a long time, it takes time for all the water to collect in the watershed and make its way to the river. So it's not like, it's actually good timing. If you go ahead and put that water back into the river, it doesn't really impact the flood potential for the area. So we have discussed that, but I think in this case, just for the longevity of the maintenance of that 14-foot trail, I think it would be better for it to be impermeable.
And that was exactly the kind of water engineering considerations I was talking about, so I appreciate that. And then the final question, for some reason I recall, are we doing any off-site improvement of bike and ped infrastructure as part of this project, or no, strictly on-site? For some reason I recall something along Hopper, or is that wishful thinking on my part?
Well, I think we had cited that we know there are some challenges with trying to get off-site improvements done, because the right-of-way is so tight on Hopper Street between our site and D Street. So we would have to purchase some private property in order to do that. So I think those are the challenges that we're working with. It's not just a matter of installing a sidewalk on right-of-way that exists today. We would have to do some sort of either work with the city on an eminent domain or purchase it privately. So I think that would kind of keep us from doing that in a timely fashion.
Okay. All right. Well, prudent not to include it in this plan then. But yeah, I'll save comments on what I'd like to see on wayfinding and all that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Kelly?
Thanks. Do you know what the speed limit is on Hopper and Hidalgo, or what the plan for Hidalgo?
Ooh, good question. I do not. Jeff? Here, I'll invite Jeff to come up. Jeff Rubendahl with Fair and Pierce. He's our traffic consultant.
We know Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, the operating speed on Hidalgo with that turn is probably in the 20-mile-an-hour range. We haven't really talked about other traffic calming features to keep it kind of low speed, but the lane widths are pretty narrow. And the separation between the bike path on the south side and the street includes the tree cover that was mentioned a little bit before.
So I believe we saw Hopper with a bike lane with a buffer. Was that just for context? That's existing conditions, because you all are not touching anything on Hopper? Am I imagining things?
So we are planning to improve Hopper just along that frontage. I'm gonna have to go to this section to be clear. Let's see.
So my question then is, what's being done in that buffer? Can there be some kind of vertical element, even if it's low, to make that a somewhat protected lane on Hopper?
Vertical protected, I'm sorry, I don't think I follow. Vertical protected meaning,
Something in the buffer to not just paint, something that gives it a vertical element to prevent drivers from just driving over the paint.
yeah, so I guess just something here.
Something so raised. Yeah. I think that comes down to the fire access because of the width of it. Is that quick look? I don't know if that's something that's been discussed, but something that I think we can consider.
Yeah,
There's
so
also a lot of driveways on that frontage too, so it gets a little funky. But I don't think there's any engineering reason why you couldn't.
okay. If you have A 1.2, the aerial apparatus diagram in front of you, and you kind of look at block 6, the Main Street buildings, there's a hard red line, the designated side of building roof line accessible to aerial apparatus fire truck. When we talked to fire at DRC last week, they had mentioned that there's a certain distance, I think it's 20 or 30 feet, you have to be within that first building. So obviously we could squeeze the buildings closer to the road if we needed to, but there's a distance there that we were trying to play with to make sure that those buildings have access to aerial apparatus for fire. So that was the one challenge that we had. We're open to that, but we just need to make sure that it works with what fire's requirements are.
Okay, I won't make a comment since I'm just asking questions, but I think you know where I was going with that. And then I have a question about what's labeled as a class 3 on, sorry, I moved my diagram again, the neighborhood greenway. So is the intent to add sharrows to the road since it's called a greenway? That kind of makes me think of a lot of traffic calming elements, so that it is a true greenway. Is that the intent along Bautista?
Yeah, so we matched the same hierarchy that's shown in the ATP maps that have been sent to the public now. So that neighborhood greenway is actually intended to be a neighborhood shared street that includes sharrows and other traffic calming elements, including making it only people that would be driving a car there have a reason to be there, which is a driveway or some other thing there. So it's really promoting bike and ped access.
Great, thank you. And if I want to take a right off of Veracruz onto Hidalgo, how do I do that? What is that intersection going to look like? Because it's a two-way cycle track, yes, and then meeting a multi-use path. So how would I take a right if I want to go towards the traffic circle? Is there gonna be
Those are the
paint?
details we'd be doing as part of the final
Okay.
support with the final design. This is very high level concept roundabout layout, but the bike connections from class 1 to class 4 are the types of treatments that is there. Hopefully there's more opportunities throughout the city that have that, this being one that would inform the design as part of that, the layout of Coffee.
More to come. My last question, which also might be a more to come, is around secure bike parking, specifically for apartments that are not going to have a garage access, and other units that might not. What kind of secure bike parking would be provided, and also the public parking lot, not necessarily secure bike parking, but bike parking.
So I don't have a number for you, but I know we've contemplated a space for bike parking. So is there a certain number threshold that we should be meeting as part of the design? Or if it's in the code, we can look that up and make sure we're following that.
Yeah, I saw in the staff report a reference to, I think in 10% might have been the one thrown out, but I would say let's look to the ATP that we're designing and what we want at citywide as the number. I don't want to make something up on the spot for you.
Okay, but I guess the point is we'll definitely follow that, and if there's some percentage that you guys would prefer, we can do that as well.
I'll also share that at the city we are working on objective design standards that could help. We are looking at updating our bike parking requirements associated with, especially with residential development projects, and that will be likely coming to PBAC for your review and feedback in October. So we'll have plenty of time to, I think, get that all straightened out before this project moves forward. Yep.
I have a couple questions. I'm wondering on Hidalgo Street, would it be possible to reduce the travel lane width and have a center median to slow traffic on Hidalgo?
Sorry, just checking the section real quick. 81. So Jeff, we show an 11-foot travel lane on Hidalgo. So are you saying reducing down to 10 and then trying to have some sort of,
Raised median.
Yeah.
I think that's the fire access issue and then maybe Julia may have some
Okay.
insight into that. But typically it's the clear width. So what we intended to do is actually make the travel lanes as narrow as possible so that by the cross flow of traffic is actually going to be one of the traffic calming elements of that.
Okay.
And on that one specifically, let's see, that's intended to kind of bring everybody close. So it's a little bit more of a feeling intimate and small and traffic calmed.
Understood. And then do you know the width of the Greenway Promenade?
I think it's 20 feet. We don't have it labeled, do we? I think it's 20 feet was the intent.
And do you know what kind of aggregate would be used on that?
It would be landscaping. As far as the actual trail,
Yeah.
we would probably use concrete unless there was a preferred material other than that.
Okay. And do you have any idea about like the lighting experience for the multi-use pathway?
Good question.
Not yet.
I feel like we've had this designed at one point, but we've kind of taken a few steps back in the last 6 months. So some of those specific detailed questions I don't know the answer to, but there would be periodic lighting, and we would make sure that it was dark sky compliant. As far as the frequency, I don't know.
Okay. I know we have that with our smart path, but it's still really dark. So something low would be nice.
We
you
do
prefer-
also have, there was lighting installed along the next section of River Trail as part of the riverfront development. And then we also had another recent development project that installed lighting along Lynch Creek Trail behind the Clover facility. So
Yeah.
we have a couple of recent projects we could use for guidance as far as spacing, type of lighting, et cetera.
So is the concern for safety? So you want it to be a little bit more lit than some past projects, or are you concerned that it's more
Yeah.
that, so it's not too dark? Is that the idea? Got it.
Yeah. And then for the open space park area, is there on-street parking on there? I don't remember.
So on Bautista Way, which is kind of the circular path that goes adjacent to the open park space,
Yes.
there would be parking on the north side of the street.
Okay.
We debated on whether that would be on the south or the north. Planning Commission preference was to have parking on one side of these streets to reduce overall parking. So we needed to put it on one side or the other.
Yes.
So there's pros and cons to each one. At this point, we're showing it on the north side of the street, but that could be moved to the south side. I think the idea was that if you look at the park from the street, it's a lot cleaner look without parking adjacent to it. But obviously there's some concerns about people getting in and out of the car and then having to cross the street. So there's a potential conflict there. So
And these are one-car garages attached to the blocks 2 and 4?
it's mostly 2-car. We do have some 1-car spread throughout. I don't have that exact percentage, but it's mostly 2-car.
And then there's no parking within those blocks? No, like on-street parking?
There are small pockets, maybe 5 to 10 spaces in each block. So there's not very many parking spaces.
So we would imagine that visitors or other cars would be parking on that side. I'm just thinking
Correct.
that there's not a lot of public parking for the park.
There's not a lot of public
Okay.
parking, and that's rather intentional. If we want parking on both sides, we could
Sure.
do that.
No.
We would be open to that.
And then it's public access to the dock?
Yes.
Okay. And is that protected? It will always be public access?
Is it protected in what way?
Like it's forever public access? I don't know what.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so that land will be donated to the city.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be city property.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you. Oh, I have one more question. On block 7 in the affordable housing, what is that light pink kind of square?
Yeah, I believe that's the amenity building. Part of the reason for keeping it as one block is to have amenities and services that that attend to people living there. So I think the idea would be either that's, I can't tell if that's the building or the playground. I know they have a play structure or playground that's planned on the campus.
Okay.
So I think that's a building just associated with that block.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Do we know if there are any plans, or has the city planned any development or any improvements to Hopper? I mean, I understand that that's sort of outside the scope of this project, but it seems to me, one of the advantages to this is that it's proximity to the smart station, but it's really difficult. I mean, that's a rough stretch of road on Hopper,
right,
between here and the smart station, and that crossing at D Street is a challenge as well. Again, I realize that may not be, in the purview of your project, but it seems like a missed opportunity if there isn't something done to make Hopper more, we can't expect people to take bikes, walk, scooter, however, to get to the smart station by going out to Lakeville. That's a problem in and of itself.
Correct.
And again, just curious if there's any of those conversations that have taken place.
There have been. I think everyone knows it's a challenge. The engineering and planning departments know it's a challenge. So we've had these discussions. So I think our biggest solution is doing what we can within the scope of our project. And we think that building the pedestrian bridge to McNear is probably the best way to avoid extra traffic on Hopper, just because of those challenges. If we had plenty of right-of-way, I think it would be a lot easier solution. We would just build a sidewalk. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more challenging than that. So we think that especially people living in, really most of the blocks, the most direct way will actually be going from your house or from the Riverfront Trail across McNear and then get to D Street that way, because it's going to be 100% pedestrian access.
I'll just add on Hopper Street, it's a great point you raise, Committee Member Quint. And there is a really great opportunity here with the, talking about the frontage improvements on Hopper Street that would be associated with this project to kind of identify that ideal cross-section for Hopper Street and hopefully carry those over to the other stretches of Hopper in the future with other projects or with the city CIP project potentially. So that's a great area for the committee to provide feedback tonight on that cross-section for Hopper Street.
I have two more questions. One, have safe routes to school considerations been made for this area? In other words, these kids that are going to be living here have to go to school.
Not specifically, no, not up to this point.
Because it's kind of the way we exist right now. I think Miwok is probably the only option, and it's across Lakeville, which is not a wonderful place to go with kids. And so I see more parents driving their children to school when I would prefer to see them walking or biking with their kids to school. So that was one of my questions. The other question involves bus stops. Is there a connection to bus stops? Is there a bus stop in this region?
There is a planned bus stop on Hidalgo Street. So currently this is it's not open to the public. This is just a private piece of property. But when Hidalgo is open, that will then be a public street, and we're planning for at least one bus stop along Hidalgo. We haven't located it yet, but we're thinking it would be, it's somewhere on Hidalgo. It's not a big street.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes.
Yeah, could you identify, there's the area that looks like it's also part of the promenade between below Block 5 and the open space. Is that just unmarked and it was intended to be the Greenway Promenade?
Yes, so I think when the project's finished, you wouldn't be able to tell one from the other. The open park space would be programmed in a specific way. So there might be a volleyball court on one side, and maybe there's landscaping that's part of the Block 5 that's private property on the other. But the idea would be that it's seamless and that you could, there's no fencing planned for either side. You could just walk in between.
Okay,
Does that
so-
answer the question?
Yeah, so it would have the feel of a developed walkway
Correct.
to get through there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, landscaped walkway.
Right. So you've mentioned the volleyball courts and some more developed amenities for recreation. Were you planning on locating some bicycle parking near those facilities?
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes,
think
that'll
that's
be-
what this committee would like to see is
Yes.
at those kinds of hubs where people are being, drawn either with kids to a playground or, something like a developed area.
Well, and I think that's
for-
the feedback that we would like tonight, because the idea is we want to collect as much of this feedback as possible and then create a plan that everybody can enjoy.
Yeah. For example, where the bridge over to the peninsula is planned, it may be an appropriate thing to plan some bike parking there on your side of the property to allow people to come over on bike and maybe put their bikes aside and park them out of the way and then do something like take part in the other amenities that you're planning.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Noted.
And I didn't see any crosswalks on at least the conceptual plan. Can you address where you're planning on putting in formal crosswalks, and whether any are planned, say, on Veracruz or within the subdivision to get people across from one housing type to another?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we haven't discussed yet. So I think it's a little preliminary in the scope, but I think the idea would be you would definitely have a crosswalk at the Greenway Promenade. But no, outside of that, we haven't discussed crosswalk specifically.
Right. Okay, so, certainly something that needs to be treated so that, people know when they have the priority to get across, especially like in that one area, in the promenade area south of the Block 5. That makes, I think that's a place to highlight, make sure that there's a crosswalk that gives people the sense that they can get across, especially with the cars being parked on one side.
And I think in general, just to respond to that a little bit, the idea is to discourage cars from passing through the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I think, as much traffic calming that we can do, the better.
Right.
In our eyes, and in the eyes of our neighbors at Tri-Point.
Right. So, and also related to sidewalks. So within Block 7, I see internal sidewalks highlighted in white, and I don't see that in Block 6. Is there a reason for that, or at least are those like the private walkways that are going to be in front of the housing? People are going to park, and that's how they're going to find their entry into their homes?
I think at this point, the simple answer is Edenhausen is working on, they've developed that site plan, and KTGY has developed blocks 1 through 6. And so I think it's just we haven't quite coordinated that level of effort yet, but there will be a network of sidewalks in all of the blocks that seamlessly connect things. But yeah, I think that's just Eden has a little bit more advanced block.
I see.
Than
Yeah,
than the
that would be
others.
important to guide people in the way you want them to go, so they're not just, going through the middle of the parking area, say in the middle of Block 6.
Right.
And so a question about circulation. So on the north side of Hidalgo Street, the green strip, so I'm not clear, is that a bike way or is that a green landscaped space?
I think the plan for that is a Class 3 bike lane.
Okay.
I'd have to check the section just to make sure, E1.
Okay, because it's a different green.
Yeah, it is a different
and
green.
I was,
Good call.
and I was confused. I didn't know if it was a landscape element,
That's right.
because you do have, the red Class 1 running up to it. So it seems like it should be, a bike way.
I'm sorry, Jeff corrected me. That's not a Class 3 bike lane. That's just landscaping.
Okay, so what happens there when you come through the roundabout and you're doing the Caulfield Extension roundabout and you've made a right onto Hidalgo. What's the treatment? Are you just on street and you're going to find yourself with sharrows, or what would a cyclist experience?
So the intent is, well, that would be shown in during detailed design, but the way that it's intended is to bring all the walkers and bikers to the south side of the street, to the property frontage. The big rectangle that's open there is the city's property that's currently under a master planning process. So the frontage for there is kind of a little bit TBD, with the idea that whatever is planned for this and that would be compatible. The idea being that what this project is intended to control is bringing everybody from Caulfield and all the other entrance points through via all modes. So we haven't designed it yet, but the idea would be to get folks to the south side of the street at Veracruz that have gone through the roundabout, through crosswalks, other traffic controlled features that we haven't studied yet to see what's needed there in terms of striping or markings and whatnot. But the idea would be to bring them through the north-south spine and get them into the bike ped walkways
Okay.
as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
So would that lend itself to like a diagonal crosswalk there?
I'm hesitant to do something too different since it's so close to the approach to the roundabout. I think what that could look like is that the roundabout layout itself includes either a jug handle or a two-stage turn to actually get folks in both directions into the roundabout where they want to be, because the roundabout itself has bikeway traffic in both directions as well. So if you take the cars out of the conversation for a minute, there's all these different bike on bike and bike on pedestrian conflicts that would have to be designed as part of the outer part of the roundabout.
Okay, that does look kind of tricky, the transition you're talking about.
It's a fun problem to solve through the design process.
Okay, so the class 4 two-way cycle track, so you've chosen to do it proposed to do it on these 2 blocks. Did you consider extending it, say, along Hidalgo Street? Were there constraints that is there more of that the public can experience in there?
I think it's something we can study further. I'm speaking on behalf. Tell me, but the thought process so far was that the south side of Hidalgo has the multi-use pathway for walking and biking, so that because there is constrained width for the remaining two-way traffic that's needed there, with the understanding that the frontage on the north side or on the courtyard side can be kind of integrated into whatever the other side of the street has.
Okay.
And then the two-way, just to confirm, or at least the Caulfield Extension planned bikeway is a class 1 or class 4. That's second agenda item we can talk about a little bit, but that's going to be compatible with whatever the ATP projects list identifies it as, and that would influence whether this plan is fully compatible or what needs to happen to make both of them compatible with each other, with the goal of providing a low-stress class 1, class 4 connection between cyclists on Caulfield and folks that want to come into and out of the site.
Okay, there just seem to be a lot of right angles, the way I'm thinking about it, where the cycle track hits the class 1. I wonder if that should be rounded, at that corner. I mean, you're bringing people to a corner, and they were traveling faster, and maybe they think they're going to experience the class 1 and be able to not necessarily just stop and make a left turn. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the area where folks are waiting to cross, whether they're walking or biking or whatnot, are the elements of the corners of the intersections, where I think there's not a lot of space there, but that is something that would need to be may affect how a yard is connected to it, and definitely sightlines is a big issue that would, in terms of building setbacks and how people can see each other coming on. The hope though is if you're riding your bike or walking, you're not going so fast that you present a challenge when you get to an intersection. And the idea is that it's comfortable and safe, but not necessarily a super high speed or a bike highway, at least not as it goes into this part of the development.
Okay, maybe some consideration can be given to having something on a curve, perhaps at these block corners, like where Veracruz hits the other side. I'm sorry. I'll do a little bit better. Okay, so back to the green strip on Hidalgo. on the northern side, I think you concluded that that was going to be landscaping, like with trees, or that's not a bike way. It's, do you have trees planned or some kind of greening up element to kind of soften the edge of the property with the adjacent industrial?
It's a sidewalk.
Okay,
But there's no bikeway.
got it.
If I understood right.
So looking at the section E1 and E2, there is a sidewalk. It's a 6-foot sidewalk, and it looks like there's a tree well. So there's a 5-foot tree well and a 6-foot sidewalk combined for 11 feet.
Okay. Okay, I'm just trying to understand, is there a draw for a pedestrian to go across to that north side of Hidalgo to, have, somewhere where she can walk her dog or whatever she wants to do?
So it looks like there would be a place to walk your dog.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the sidewalk.
That's all I have.
Just going to ask one follow-up. We just talked about how Hopper is going to maybe set a tone for future development. And when I was looking at that cross-section again, I want to make sure I'm understanding it. What stuck out was the 10-foot sidewalk, then 4-foot tree well. So that ends up being a 14-foot, which is larger than the rest. And then and this is just my train of thought, it looks like 2 10-foot travel lanes, I assume for cars, and then a 6-foot for non-vehicular. Can you just break that down briefly just to make sure I'm understanding that?
So the 6-foot, so you have 10-foot, 2 10-foot travel lanes for vehicular. The 6-foot it's mislabeled. It should be for a bike. A bike, one-way.
So the 6-foot, it should be a bike.
If the buffer that's drawn here, and Julia, if you're watching, section F, the buffer is shown at the same grade as the bike lane. That's a class 2, potentially a buffered bike lane, class 2. Okay. If that were raised, it would then be a one-way cycle track, class 4. I think one of the things that we had talked about, and I don't know where we ended up, is how that interfaces with potential driveway curb cuts and the way folks are actually getting to the street, to the proposed streets, and some of the other elements on the side there. But I think it's something we can clarify and clean up and understand and get some feedback as to the desired connection there.
And then for the 10-foot sidewalk, again, sticks out as kind of a larger street area. Just what was the reasoning behind that?
10 feet sidewalk, it's wider than most, but the right size of sidewalk, it's actually comfortable because you have development on one side and the plantings on the other, so that it's not constrained by one person and walking in one direction. I think this was actually informed by the draft objective design standards or other ongoing work that the city's and the general plan is looking into, understanding what the ideal and planned level of sidewalk widths are based on the hierarchy of roadways. So we wanted to be as consistent with that as possible, knowing that it'll probably come in front of this group at some point soon.
Consistency is great. Thank you for breaking that down.
Just one question after so many great questions. Wow. I think the thing I was just wondering about in terms of thinking about what the retail is on the corner of Hidalgo Street next to the amenity, just in trying to promote the idea of 15-minute neighborhoods. This seems like a neighborhood that is somewhat kind of closed off, just given Hopper Street in Lakeville. Is there any kind of predetermined use for that in terms of being able to be a grocery store or something that can really, save a trip for folks just wanting to keep things and car trips local?
Yes. So we've committed to 8,000 square feet. I think what's shown is probably a little bit smaller than that. But 8,000 square feet is what we've committed to. So that would be multi-commercial. We're thinking it would be at a minimum a restaurant, which is typically around 3,000 to 4,000, could be an ice cream shop. And then if space is available, it could be a childcare facility. It's probably a little small for a childcare facility, but we would open it up to 8,000 square feet of retail with preference for a restaurant to draw people to the area. It could be a corner store, to your point, about a 15-minute neighborhood. So we'd like a place where you could buy, milk, eggs, bread, that sort of thing, so you don't have to cross Lakeville. So that's our idea for what that retail would be. So I don't think we would deed restrict it in that way, but we would definitely plan for a grease trap for a restaurant. So we would have that infrastructure built in place. But that's the idea.
Great, thanks. And maybe just one other question. Have you considered anywhere along this pathway for installing one of the, I'm not sure what they're called, bicycle repair maintenance stations?
We have actually, yes, that was part of our planning. So I don't think we show it on this plan, but initially when we started programming the park, there was a small building associated with the public parking. And there was basically a restroom facility, and then a small, it would probably just be a city space, city storage space. But we're also thinking there would be some sort of bike repair at that location, which is centrally located next to the parking lot. Kind of makes sense to have that synergy there.
Yeah, there's also, I think, maybe some potential synergy at the pinch point of the future bridge, just considering people would probably be crossing that to maybe avoid having to go down Hopper Street or what have you. So maybe just another potential option for location. That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
No other questions from the committee? Okay, so this opens public comment. The public is invited to make comments on this item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If you haven't done so already, please fill out a speaker card and bring it to the clerk. And clerk, have you received any comments prior to the meeting on this item?
No, I do not see any public comments listed on the agenda.
Thank you. First, I have Dave Alden.
Thank you. I was going to begin my comments by noting that Skinnell is a sponsor of the film festival. I thought I should give them credit for that. And then I looked around the room and realized I was underselling myself. The traffic engineer for the project, Fair and Piers, is a sponsor. Safe Streets Petaluma, represented by Bruce Hagan, is a sponsor. The city is a sponsor, is represented by Councilmember Barnacle. Even Sonoma County Bike Coalition, while not a sponsor, is helping us sell tickets. So this is a preview of what we're going to do in 2 weeks. Hope to see you all there. With regard to the project, I keep hearing the comment of Hopper Street in front of Shamrock is impossible to solve. I get it. I really see the problem, especially given some of the antagonism right now between Shamrock and the city and other developers. But this site is within a half mile of transit facilities. This is the state definition of TOD. This is what the state legislature is telling us we have to make TOD. We have to get bike and ped access to transit facilities. I get that it's a problem. I get that the developer cannot solve this problem on his own. But if the city is going to live up to their commitment to be carbon neutral, this is where we just have to figure out a way to solve this. I don't know what it is. I'm just telling you we have to find a solution. On a related topic, I am uncomfortable with the revised street grid or street connection pattern. I have been pushing for the idea of a shuttle, a short headway shuttle that connects Oyster Cove to 500 Hopper to Riverfront, back to the transit centers, then to downtown, and then does the loop again. It's not an inexpensive option. I estimate roughly $1 million a year to run something like that, but it takes 5 to 7% of all homes in Petaluma and put them in a place where they can really survive without cars. The problem is when we don't have those straight connections between this project and Riverfront, the only place the bus makes sense is down Hidalgo, which doesn't put it as close to homes as we would like. I understand why we've got to that pattern, but it's a pattern that looks like what people in 2023 want, and our goal is to build a community that works in 2040. In fact, I would say that's probably the biggest single problem I see in almost every project in Petaluma. The developer has done a great job of telling us what he can put together, what he can build and market in 2023. And we're going, but we want something that works in 2040, and we're not finding a way to have that conversation of how to meld those two visions together. I don't know how to fix it either, except we just need to keep talking and find better answers than we found thus far. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Eris Weaver.
So when I look at this plan, I imagine, okay, what if I lived in this project? How would I, and I ride my bike or take the train almost everywhere I go at all times of day and night. And I try to imagine if I lived in this project, how would I get where I wanted to go? How would I get to work? How would I get to a store? How would I get to a restaurant? How would I get out of the freaking project? And you barely, and it's not there. It is not there. The only places I can see where you can safely get, where you can get out are, okay, the roundabout at Caulfield, which is fine if that's the direction I want to go. Hopper, if all we're having is a class 2 bike lane, and then the clusterfuck, excuse my French, that is right there around the train station, that's not going to get people, you know, very few people are going to do that. I've been almost hit at that stage, at that intersection so many times. And then a bridge into the park. I don't know the details of how that park is being programmed. I'm guessing that it's probably not likely that riding through the park, is it going to be lit? Am I going to feel safe riding through a park to get home? And then a bridge across the river, is that going to be set up in a way that feels safe for someone to do? This is not a bike and pedestrian friendly place to live. It's not. Something, whether it's the developer or the city, has to do something with Hopper and D Street and Lakeville and that whole intersection to make it work, to make it safe. And I don't see any other way to get out or cross, you know, other than those 3 points. And I wouldn't want to live there. I wouldn't be able to get around. I wouldn't let my kid ride their bike to school going in and out of those possible locations. It's not good for schools. It's not good for kids. Not good for me.
Thank you, Eris. Jessica Moses.
Thank you to the applicant and the commission. While I understand this is a housing development, I'm most focused on the public space development in this project and ensuring it's actually accessible to all. Perhaps selfishly, I'm quite looking forward to some additional access to right along the river. Which brings me to Batista. I was at the Planning Commission working session and liked Concept 3. The reason I preferred 3's design is because having road between blocks 2 and 5 and the 4A open park would make the park more accessible to all. To that end, Batista Way needs some revisions in order to dovetail into access to the park. As currently designed, having parking and the multi-use path on the development side will make the trail feel like an extension of the development sidewalk and will not be welcoming to the greater public. I'd invite the applicant and commission to think about St. Augustine Circle, which separates Wiseman. It goes frontage, sidewalk, roadway with parking, multi-use trail, Wiseman Park, which I think works well for pedestrians and cyclists to access the amenities of the public park without feeling like you're traipsing through someone's front yard. Similarly, selfishly, as an East Sider who works downtown, I'll also echo the concerns for Hopper. I ride that length, Caulfield to D daily, and it's a choppy, sun-baked mess. As mentioned, Hopper is the road to access SMART for the future Petaluma residents Skinnell hopes to attract. You've asked for feedback on the ideal cross-section for Hopper, and I'd insist on a protected bike lane. We need a raised buffer to ensure defensible space for riders who are currently sharing the road with a variety of big trucks. Just this morning, I was passed by 2 cement trucks and 2 giant RVs who thankfully gave me a wide berth, but at current, and especially if we're only doing 20 feet of roadway, might have to dodge into a bike lane. As for trees, Hopper is desperate for shade, and the species choice should be tall so they don't crunch the space available to pedestrians and cyclists. In closing, I'd encourage the commission and eventually the council to continue to consider how this development connects to other portions of the city and how we're setting the tone for river access and encouraging smart train riders to walk or ride to the station. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Bruce.
Anybody else named Bruce?
Must be me, thank you. Hi, and thanks for doing this. This is fantastic just to see all the level of depth on this. I wasn't planning on speaking, but Derek pointed out something in the HTML packet that said the design speed for the roadway was 30 miles an hour, and it made us wonder, is the expectation that the speeds in this development are going to be as high as 25 or 30, or will this be a 20 is plenty zone, which we need to start doing citywide for existing streets as well as new ones? And one other thing, thanks for either having read or soon to read the emails that I sent earlier about what we're doing to implement the recommendations of the City Thread project. And it kind of lays out a course of action where we can start dealing with a good possibility of getting the things we want and need on intersections like Lakeville and D, which is a mess, and really D Street, and you name it. I could come up with a lot more, but I just encourage you to read that information. If you have any questions about it or want to be involved in the effort to make all that stuff happen, you know how to reach me. My name is Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. That closes public comment and brings it back to the committee for discussion.
Okay. So number one, we really needed these slides with the packet. Like we're here to help you, and I've got a lot more that I will be, want to say, but that I don't even know because I haven't studied the packet or the slides. So that's my one, to start with. The second thing is we've got to integrate this with the existing development, and this has got to be built with as a community because it is, as Eris pointed out, fairly isolated from a lot of things. This needs to be a fairly self-sufficient community. By the end of this, we're going to have something in the neighborhood of 800 or 900 homes, probably, is in this area. It's about 4% of all of Petaluma's housing stock. I think we can do better with 15-minute neighborhoods. I think we have to. As a city council person, I will demand it, or I won't vote for it. The design of the streets, you mentioned a 20-mile-an-hour corner at Hidalgo. That's a really poor design intent. I think when you talk about slowing down cut-through traffic and things like that, it should be done through narrower streets, alleys, streets where it's, you would never go over 15 miles an hour. Design this thing like you'd want to live there, not like you want to drive there. That brings me to block 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the single point in, single point out. I realize it was done to stop cut-through traffic for Riverfront, but it's a bad design decision. If I live in the back of block 3 and I need to go on Caulfield, like the future Southern crossing, I would actually need to cross, I counted somewhere between 20 and 25 additional doors to go where I'm trying to go. That's 20 to 25 additional opportunities to hit kids. And we don't want that. So grid those streets, please, and make them narrow and slow, really, really slow. Also, when you, I just have this feeling that garbage trucks will go in there and you're going to hear beep, 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 beep for about 25 minutes every time, every one that they're in. The affordable housing, I'd like to see that integrated better. I think it can be done by reorienting those buildings and maybe taking a small, like a mid-block on Hidalgo Street between Hopper and the Bend there, of taking another street in there and orienting buildings to that. And it will then, instead of looking like it's two separate developments that are side by side, it actually looks like a street that the buildings can look the same and they can not feel like they're in a different place, because they're not. They're part of the community too. On the retail, I noticed that the public parking lot probably has the best view. We're giving cars the best position in this whole thing in terms of like river access. So let's try and reshape that to be the retail. Or, you know, like if I was going to a restaurant, I'd want to eat where the parking lot is. So let's try and think about that pedestrian experience, please. I support the roundabout, but I think, as the committee member Bond said, like it feels a little sketchy to have the three-way roundabout with the cycle track all sort of coming in and converging in one place. Definitely study that, but it feels like a solution looking for a problem, I guess, is maybe the term that comes to mind. I think flexible community spaces, daycares, community rooms, things like that are like really, really important for this whole area. We've got to think about how to allow people to live here. There's going to be 800 homes, hopefully a lot of families in there with kids, and they're going to need places to play, have birthday parties, things like that. And I realize it might not pencil, that's to what Mr. Alden said earlier, but we're building communities for the future, and this truly is going to be a fairly self-contained community because of the physical barriers that are locking it in. The bridge, in the staff report, it said a potential bridge, but I think it needs to be a must because it is, you know, and I appreciate the lights in the park. We're going to need to work with Petaluma River Park on, you know, park lighting, if that, you know, to make that work for people. 2-car garages, half a mile from a smart station. That feels way overdone. We're at about 1.4 unit, like parking spaces per unit right now. And I realize that may be what Petaluma's current model is, but it's not the model of the future, and it's not the model we want around our train station. I think one of the problems we have is everybody in Petaluma is thinking about, like, you know, it's a suburban town right now. And like part of diversifying our housing stock needs to be like recognizing that this next wave of Petaluma people are going to probably ride their bike more. They're going to ride the train more, and we should design for that. So I'd say 1.4 bike parking spaces per unit, and you know, 0.5 parking spaces per unit is more what is in my mind. And I shared a picture with Bjorn of the new apartments over here on Petaluma Boulevard, the La Villa. If you go by on the waterfront, they've got bike parking there, and you know that's not even close to it, you know, rented out yet, and all the bike parking is completely taken. So from an apartment standpoint, 1 bike parking space per room is totally ample. Like they're gonna fill it up, and it will actually promote riding bikes. So yeah, I mentioned the more thoughtful retail placement. I like the idea of close to the bridge, as was mentioned earlier, but definitely, you know, at least where the parking lot is, but closer to the bridge makes it more central in the project in general too. I really like hearing about the bus stop on Hidalgo Street. Yeah, so, I mean, probably the thing that gave me the most heartburn was seeing that we don't have gridded streets. Like, when we look at West Petaluma, we've got gridded streets, and when we look at East Petaluma, we don't, and a lot more people drive over there. It's a lot less walkable, and I realize that, you know, the riverfront people may want traffic not to go through, but we're just funneling traffic onto different places. It's all going somewhere. And like if you live on Block 3 and you're in there and you need to go to, in the back of Block 3, and you need to go to the grocery store, you're traveling a lot farther to get where you are trying to go. And that just, you know, there's more opportunities to hit people. There's more, you know, more intersections. There's just all kinds of different things. So please just grid those damn streets. All the buildings should be oriented out. I think you hit on that, but I definitely would say I don't want to see like fences facing roads. I want to see like stoops and things like that, even if most people enter through the back through an alley or garage or something. Yeah, that's, I think something else may come up after hearing everybody else's great comments, but that's what I'll start with.
Thank you. Yes.
And I'll start my comments off with a question. In looking at the staff's kind of top 4 questions, we were asked about the appropriateness of different class of trails, especially Veracruz and Batista. Can you describe, when I'm looking at the cross-section of Batista, where the bikes, I should point out, I'm the newest member of the committee, so excuse me if this is like a nascent question I'm missing here. But on Batista, it says the Greenway, and from the cross-section I'm seeing, where are the bikes going there? I see the parkway area, the 5-foot parkway is kind of a tree space. There's the sidewalk, 2 travel lanes and street parking. Where's the bike lane?
Answer them live, that's okay?
Yeah,
No, wait,
please.
okay.
That'd be
the neighborhood
perfect.
greenway, those are the class 3 bike boulevard type streets that are throughout the city and residential streets with traffic calming, slow speeds, low traffic, so that bikes are in with shared, they have the whole street.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm glad I said I was the newest member. That proves it. Yes, perfect. All right, so that's what I wanted to make sure. I think for me, I would like to see on Hopper Street, if possible, for that to be a protected bike lane. I was also going to ask for us to give a breakdown of what those barriers are. I know the applicant hinted at it, the barriers, and working with the city and other parties to extend that cross section down through Hopper and start dealing with some of these bigger issues. I don't know if that's out of scope or if there's anything more particular you can give us in that conversation, if there's been kind of failed starts at trying to work something out with other private property owners, or what's happened there. That would be great if you can, yeah.
So we have, I don't have the exact right-of-way width, but we have a width, I think it's, call it 40 feet or 50 feet, something like that. And then it reduces down to the existing right-of-way width, which is about 25 or 30. So we can control the right-of-way width on our frontage. You can just take that amount of space away from the private development, and we're fine with that. But if you go down in front of where Shamrock Construction is located, that right-of-way width stays the same. So unless you purchase additional right-of-way to match the section, you won't be able to keep that consistency all the way down to D Street. So you would have to buy or do some sort of eminent domain to capture some of that private property in order to keep that consistent all the way down.
And just because, Bjorn, we have you here, have there been any meetings between all parties involved to discuss this? Has there been internal city meetings? Just so we kind of see, I'm sure this has been thought about, like most big issues we run across.
As far as Hopper Street in front of the Shamrock property, to my knowledge, there have not been any meetings to discuss the roadway there. That being said, with all of the development activity in this area, it does, it would make a lot of sense to elevate it as a priority. We don't have an active CIP project for Hopper Street, so all of that's up to further consideration by our city council and city leadership.
Well, I think with the confluence of Oyster Cove, Shamrock getting involved there, this development, okay, that'd be great to see those conversations develop. So I would say that, yeah, a protected bike lane on Hopper for this section, I do like that idea. And because that is going to be the main in and out for folks biking or using active transport. I do also want to advocate for Hopper again on a slightly as big as possible tree wells. I understand the 10-foot sidewalk for objective design standards. So I kind of leave that to the city team and your team. Anything we can do to err on the side of more space for bigger trees there, I think is great. Again, in my head, I always think of sycamores as kind of the ideal to give us shade and coverage there. Location of required bicycle amenities. I think I'll echo a lot of other folks here. Those amenities around a potential crossing for the river park. I remember in the early concept we saw at planning, there might have been a public garden potentially proposed there as well. And there's that kind of jut out of space there where that bridge would go. I think having bike amenities there, but then also if it ends up being public parking or not. I remember there were 2 potential public parking options where it is now between 5 and 6, but also there was an option on the south where currently there's the blue multi-use lane that continues all the way, and there's a little stretch of it to the south that kind of goes in between the Riverside Trail and Batista. I remember there was talk of a potential public parking spot there. All that to say, I think where it is now, if that ends up being the final location, and if there ends up being that river access there, I think that's a no-brainer to have bicycle amenities there. I think obviously any potential commercial or retail, any other river access points. And yeah, also want to say that having benches along that trail, along the whole outer Riverside Trail, benches on that north side facing out to the river at the appropriate intervals, I think is a must. Again, that might be a no-brainer in your design. Desired lighting and wayfinding, again, just for me, harmonizing with what's going to be existing at Riverfront, but then also making sure that we call out connections within the city, connections to transit, off-site destinations. Obviously, if that bridge comes in, connections to Riverfront, just calling out and directing people, especially people who don't use those trails a lot, where they can go and how they can connect to try to incentivize them to use it more. Lighting, I think along that Riverside Trail too, we want to be careful on lighting. I think part of the desire in keeping that setback almost untouched, the Petaluma River setback leading up to the trail almost untouched, was to kind of almost have some kind of rewilding going on there, really leave it open as a natural space. So I think we do want to be careful on lighting design there. I don't know if that just means making sure lighting is again on the north side of the trail, if it's just certain downcast lighting, but to limit tons of light exposure spilling out into that natural space would be my preference, just to keep with that theme of trying to keep that Riverside area, that setback, relatively untouched or not have too many human impacts. But I do hear other committee members' concerns about making sure it's lit enough to be safe. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And then on desired pedestrian and bicycle improvements along the riverfront, really I already called out benches. Again, we're not at a planting plan. Again, trees are going to come into play in a really big way there, but depending on how faithful we need to be to the river access enhancement plan, but just overall appropriate tree coverage across all trails is what makes them more usable. And I know we've kind of covered that throughout. So I'll kind of limit my comments there because I will see this on planning again. But you know, and I was one that pushed on planning or threw out the idea of the current Greenway Promenade between blocks 2 and 4, 1 and 3. It looks like right now Guadalupe does kind of go south, connect with Pico and Batista again. Am I seeing that right? And then above that, north of Guadalupe, is that just emergency vehicle or is that gridded street as well?
The idea would be EVA vehicle only at this point. I suppose, you know, thinking through what Brian Barnacle was saying, you could have access and then just cut it off, but I think that goes against the gridded street idea. So I don't know if that would work, but you know, we're open to anything. You know, if we need that to be a gridded street, we're definitely open to it. We're listening to the Tri-Point neighbors as well, and we want to be good neighbors. So I think, you know, we're definitely open to keeping that gridded.
Okay, well, those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Terry. Kelly?
Thanks. I'll just echo a few comments in agreement and then ask some additional questions. I'm definitely in supportive of more one-car garages versus 2. I think 2 sends the wrong message for this project as it is, like we've heard tonight, location to the SMART train and really focusing on transit-oriented development. Also, 20 is plenty. We heard that as well. I don't know if there was something incorrect in one of the reports, but I would definitely advocate for 20 mile per hour or less speed limit throughout the project. Would love for the city to, maybe Bjorn, this is for you separately, but to hear another time how the city's microtransit program might connect with neighborhoods like this and serve these types of neighborhoods as that expands. Would love to see at the Greenway Promenade, at those mid-block crossings, some raised crosswalks so that cars that are passing through know that it's I have to look out for something. There's someone walking there, and pedestrians are a little more protected. And then similarly on Hopper, I think that needs to be a protected bike lane if this is actually going to be a safe road for people to take to the train station. And so I would encourage you to think creatively about driveways. At driveways, can the bike lane just be raised? And so that offers some level of protection for the bike and tells the car that they're passing through. I mean, cities have done this and have worked with driveways and big vehicles. So I feel like we can figure out we have to figure out a way to make that happen. And then also encourage the city to prioritize through our ATP some Hopper, Lakeville, et cetera, improvements in alignment with the development timeline for this project. Would also encourage affordable housing to be throughout. I'm not a huge fan of it being kind of siloed off to the side, and it seems like it's only one type of housing. People need affordable housing of all different styles, and not just apartments, but the duets and the townhouses, et cetera. And then lastly, well, two things, sorry. Lighting. I know Clover, behind Clover, that development, there is lighting. I think it's not nearly enough, and a lot of them are already broken or don't seem to be working. So I think that needs to not be looked at as an example, but we need to rethink that lighting over there. And so, yeah, I would definitely encourage perhaps a balance, not to disturb the natural area just beyond, but definitely want to have enough lighting so people actually use it when it is dark out and it feels safe and you don't feel like you're going to fly off your bike into the river or down a little embankment. And last comment is I would encourage to maybe look at deed restriction for a corner store, because if we want this to be a 15-minute neighborhood, it's nice that a restaurant can draw people from other neighborhoods, but the point of this is to not have people that live here have to take trips beyond, for them to be able to access what they need within this community. So I would love to see something that serves the people that live here. A restaurant would be nice too, but I think in addition to something that really serves the community in a corner store would be a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Adam.
All right. Yeah, definitely love that idea of having some type of deed restriction on grocery store. I think that's vital. And as well, echoing the comment too, just how valuable it can be to have affordable housing in a variety of different kind of housing options which are provided across the site. I do like that affordable housing is right next to the channel, so that's a nice view, but I think getting various affordable options besides just, say, apartment buildings would be preferred. I was taking Eris's suggestion of living in block 3 somewhere and needing to go to the grocery store and thinking about, well, if I need to do a bigger trip and I want to go to Safeway, what would that look like? Wanting to maybe ride my bike. And I just thinking about kind of Caulfield and Lakeville. I'm just trying to either, go straight, I want to go get some Mexican food at Ortega's, or go left. There's not even a crosswalk there, for one, to cross over on the southern side, across Lakeville. So it's only 3 crossings on that street. But then, yeah, wanting to make that left to access Safe, or Lucky, I guess it is, there. Just thinking about maybe some improvements there. They're very they're very soft corners as well too. So bulb outs, a bike box, turn lane, something along those lines, I think could be really helpful of just trying to make sure that those, the shopping centers that are closest to it are safe to get to. And then I think my last comment is just maybe overall around just building design. I'm just, I guess, thinking about how we can design buildings for the future and think about the knowledge that we do have. A big part of, I think, how we design these from scratch is orienting them towards the sun and really maximizing that kind of solar gain. So kind of in that north-south orientation, and just making sure that kind of prioritize how the layout is designed. I think making sure that homes are efficient is incredibly important. Secondly, making sure there's community spaces and, you know, safe ways to travel. And I think then lastly, kind of where the parking, automobile parking might go, that should be kind of the last consideration. But design everything around those kind of building orientation and safe routes and public spaces first. Sorry, coming in here a little bit late looking at these designs, but just want to really emphasize that for such a great opportunity of this blank slate of land that we really try to maximize the green building design features that we all you know, really know about and are proven. So just not doing the same kind of standard model that has been done for decades. That's it.
I would like to add, I would like to echo the comments up here. And I'm also thinking about the Greenway Promenade. I like the idea. I don't think that everyone would necessarily be using this, and that's my assumption. Maybe the people that are close by, but I think primarily people will be using the trail along the river, or going to the park. I'm just wondering if that land could be better utilized as a true community space, like to have gardens within the blocks, or like community gardens or a barbecue area, instead of talking about having volleyball or these things just within the open space park, like what we could do within the blocks to make it be more community oriented there. And I especially want to echo the comments about the 15-minute neighborhood and the deed restrictions. Thank you. Pamela, please.
I'd also like to echo the comments that have gone before mine. I'm a little concerned that this proposed subdivision seems isolated, and the connectivity to the existing development and the development that will come after this, I think it is really critical. I think it is important for us to be thinking about that. Some of the green spaces, I wonder how useful, for example, some of the green space is really going to be on the nearer to Batista, towards the riverside. So I know that there's perhaps some different ideas on how that land can be used, but I'd like to remember that in the river enhancement plan, there was the concept of bringing the public down and creating a space where people would say, hey, let's go down to the river, and have multiple options to bring a kayak, bring a picnic. And I'm not quite sure what the planning is that you have in mind, but I'd like to see some hubs. Maybe the restaurant could be closer to where the pedestrian bridge is, and maybe the green space could be given more prominence, and you could do something a little different with that one parking lot that's shown by lot 6. Maybe the emphasis could be flipped a little bit, so that there's more ways to bring the public down, and still allow someone to bring a kayak and put it in if that was a possibility. The kind of the center parking that's shown in the development of the buildings in block 6, it just seems like there's an emphasis on parking, like a sea of parking in the center. And I wonder if that could be revisited. It just seems like it's just like dominating that area. And I echo the comments about, really how many, do we have to plan for 2 cars for each residential unit? I guess I'd like to think that we could reduce that and create maybe some smaller green spaces within the development that serve, a smaller area. I like the idea of a smaller community garden or, some little place for people to gather within these areas. I also like the idea of interspersed affordable housing as well. The idea of a restaurant or some kind of an amenity where somebody could get a sandwich and a couple of groceries, I think is a great idea. Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure the affordable housing is over there because you can't capture the tax credits, right? Right. So the way affordable housing works is if you scatter it through the whole thing, you can't capture the tax credits, and that's like key to funding affordable housing. And that means that all of the market rate units are actually subsidizing the affordable units, making them have to pay more. So if we want to try and keep it affordable for the market rate people, like, our teachers, our firefighters, things like that to get in, like that's part of the reason is just you kind of have to you have to have those separate projects. That's like the reason why they're doing it at least that way. And that's why our inclusionary housing ordinance is, I wouldn't say it's a success as much as it sounds great.
Yes, Adam.
Maybe just one minor correction. I was just looking at the southern part of Veracruz Street where there's a class 4 little stub on the south side of Bautista Way. I guess, is class 4 technically, that's only for on-street and there's no street there. So should that be a class 1 little stub? Maybe just, okay. Just double checking, thanks.
Continuity.
Are there any other comments? Yes, Franklin.
I'd like to, take one moment and just share that I'm really kind of excited about the project. There's lots of suggestions for improvement and feedback, but honestly, anytime we can get more homes in Petaluma, I think that's a good thing, especially when they're a little denser and closer to public transportation like SMART. Having said that, I'll echo a couple of key points, make it brief. I do like the comments about making the affordable housing, not look and feel separate, right? Anything that we can do to make that, to remain part of the community, with similar buildings, similar look and feel, I think that's, definitely a good thing. More bike parking, more bike amenities, fewer places to park cars. I know, like someone who lives on the east side, we have neighborhoods on the east side that, there's a lot of cars on the streets, and I wish that it was different. So I don't want to create that, but through this, I would like to see it thoughtfully designed to encourage, other forms of active transportation, and really, try to design for the future there. And then lastly, I'd like, also as someone who lives on the southeast side and makes his way to downtown Petaluma frequently, I would just say don't underestimate the demand for people wanting to drive through this neighborhood when that southern bridge gets built, right? I'm someone who drives the Corte Madera on a regular basis to go to work, and every morning when I get on the Petaluma Bridge, I look down to see if they've started building that bridge yet, right? And I think there's a lot of people in my community that are looking forward to that. And so, again, I don't know what that offers here other than to say, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to travel that way. And so, just be prepared for it.
That makes it even scarier.
Yes.
To do a bit of echoing as many of us have been doing in the last 5 minutes. I very much would like to see protected bike lanes along the frontage of Hopper. I think that's absolutely imperative. I know what we're talking about when we talk about, well, if we go down a little further, it would be hard, perhaps, for the city to demand protected bike lanes in front of the cement company, but at least there's a lot of space in front of the cement company. I mean, there's a lot of off-road space, which, maybe we could make some kind of a deal. But I would very much like to see protected bike lanes. I think that's the only way any bicyclist or even a pedestrian who's using inappropriately the protected bike lane to get from point A to point B, it's the only way to keep them safe. Dave Alden's idea of the micro transit, that's an idea that I think we really ought to look into as a city. Not that it, it would have something to do, I think it would help this particular project feel less isolated. Maybe some of the people who are living there and don't want to take their car out, but don't ride their bike, for example, wouldn't it be easier if they could hop a shuttle and the shuttle could take them to a downtown location or take them to the smart train station if it were raining? I think that would be something that we should be looking into. And also the every 15-minute concept of retail needs to serve the people who live there. A small grocery store is really important to that concept, and that's a concept that I hope Petaluma will continue to pursue. I had one other question. Are there electric car hookups here? I didn't hear any mention, we didn't ask any questions
Yes,
about that.
there will be. Every home will have the connection for an EV car.
So each unit will have a connection?
Every single family home, and then there will be a collection of some percentage for the multifamily units. I don't think it's a one-to-one on the multifamily. I think the requirement is less, but we would follow state and city requirements at that point.
Right.
But all
Thank
the
you.
homes will have them.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
And then one final question, Walker. I know we've talked about retail at the site before. Obviously, the complexion of retail changed massively. Can you talk about any retail studies you guys have done, retail demand studies? I know previously, I wasn't sure your guys' experience with kind of smaller scale retail in some of these developments, or what your thoughts around that were, just because we're hearing it echoed up here. And I love the idea of artfully placed corner store or something. I mean, I live on the west side near Ray's Deli and love it, but I just wondered what you guys have explored in terms of viability and things like that.
Yeah, most of our studies have been around the residential portion of the project. As far as retail goes, it's really just been conversation with brokers and what would work well. So, I mean, really, we're taking the lead of people like Dave and others in the city who want this to be a true 15-minute neighborhood. So, and as far as the size, what we're really trying to do is just make it part of one of the bottom floors of the multifamily buildings. That's why it's located where it is now. I hear the comments about, it's actually the parking lot is like the best geography on the site, which I can understand that comment. But that's the way it's currently laid out, the way it is. It's not, there haven't been any specific retail studies around the site. We view this as it is a mixed use because of the retail component, but it's mainly residential heavy with a small portion of mixed use.
And I think we've seen on some developments, first floor kind of flexible, a little higher ceilings and maybe flex units to potentially be retail in the future. Yeah. Is that something we could put in the mix when we're talking about design?
Totally. The work live would probably be the best, part of that, where there's 11 units where you've got 3-story townhomes and the bottom floor would be either retail or commercial, so office or something like that. And we did that intentionally on Hidalgo, so it's more of the frontage of, kind of the forward-facing road.
And just so I know where that's delineated, that's not the amenity and retail we show there. Is that?
That's
okay,
those.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so those would be, what's the best way to describe it? It would be convertible.
So those would be convertible to a potential corner store, retail use in the future.
I think the idea is more office, but I think we would be on board with retail uses there. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the flex space idea. So it's something to think about to kind of meet the needs of the community and what folks on the committee want to see.
Okay.
Any other comments? Oh. Okay, that closes this item.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Really quickly, I just want to make sure, we obviously just collected a lot of feedback. I'm hoping Emmanuel is still with us. Emmanuel, I just wanted to make sure you feel good with the feedback you got from the committee, if there are any remaining questions you wanted to address, or if it would be helpful to run through some of the themes we heard in the comments.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you to the committee for your thoughtful and detailed review and comments on the proposal. I took many pages of notes, and I'll be having a debrief meeting with the applicant team. And I don't know if the applicant team, Walker, or any of your team members have any outstanding burning questions. I guess this might be an opportunity to get those answered. But I think from staff's perspective, thank you very much for the committee's time and review. What I was looking for, I've received. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I just have one question. As it relates to the 2-car garages, I know there were a lot of comments about that. So we're working with some floor plans that would be like a convertible junior ADU on the bottom floor. So where you could have either a 2-car garage or a 1-car with an ADU. And the idea is, a lot of people don't even use their garages for cars. A lot of times it's storage. So that's valuable for either storage or a junior ADU. And so I'm just wondering and I don't want to open a can of worms, but the opinions, about a junior ADU on the bottom floor. So you would show a 2-car garage with an option to go to a 1-car with a junior ADU. And if that would generally be supported, maybe a yes or no would be a better way to ask that.
That's good information. I think that's a yes. Yeah.
I mean, more housing is good, so if we can increase the unit count, great.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for this presentation. So now we're moving to the active transportation plan update for September 2023. And this is being presented by Bjorn and Jeff Rubendahl again.
Yes, thank you. I will start off. Would the committee like a quick 5-minute break? That was a long item. Figured I might as well ask before I jump in. Happy to jump in. Up to you.
I think we're okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I will share my screen here. All right, so I'm going to kick us off with a few updates and then pass it over to Jeff. Let's see here. Where's my outline? So we're going to just quickly touch on the community workshop we're planning for September 25th. Share updates from both of our ad hoc committees and what we've been working on since our last meeting. And then Jeff is going to walk us through an update on the prioritization criteria that was presented for your feedback back in May. And then also talk through a new item, which is our proposed approach to the implementation plan. And then just wrap up quickly with our schedule. So the community workshop, as I think you all know by email, we're hosting on Monday, September 25th, 6 p.m. at the community center. That will be, it'll just include several stations and tables where people can engage with city staff, Fair and Peers, and you all on specific topics. The people can drop in at any time, so it's not like you need to be there right at 6 p.m. to meaningfully participate. So we're hoping to provide some flexibility that people can make it, anticipate taking 20, 30 minutes to kind of walk through and give feedback, and then hopefully be on your way and go enjoy your evening. Thanks to all of you who have offered to volunteer to help that night. I've heard from several of you, any of you who would like to help out are still welcome to do so. Just send me an email so I know to include you on our emails. So I've met several times with our wonderful Vision and Goals ad hoc committee. That's Kelly, Darren, Marja, and Pete Gang volunteered from the public to assist us in crafting a good, strong vision statement and goals that that PBAC is involved in shaping and is proud of. So we've also, at Pete's suggestion, we've also added a kind of a higher level plan, purpose, and context section to, the scope of this ad hoc committee has kind of extended to basically writing the introduction paragraph or introduction chapter for the plan, which is great. And so what that plan, purpose, and context section seeks to do is really define the role of the active transportation plan. That's something we talked about a little bit at our last meeting. Its relationship relative to the general plan is especially important since it is technically adopted as part of the general plan. But just kind of, and drawing those connections between the active transportation plan and other planning documents, and also heavily referencing the idea that while this plan is focused just on active transportation on active transportation, it obviously that work supports much larger city goals and policies and plans around land use and mitigating climate change, and improving the vibrancy and the health of the community. So that's where that section really draws all those connections, also touching obviously on all of the benefits of active transportation. And then in addition to that, we've of course been revising the draft vision and goals. So happy to share with you the current draft vision statement. And I don't know that we're, I'm sure happy to take feedback on this tonight, but just wanted to share this as a sort of a status update. So what we've incorporated here, something that is more aspirational than what was previously shown, something that really tries to describe, if we are successful in building out every project and implementing every program in the active transportation plan, what will Petaluma look like in 20 years? And that's what this statement is seeking to do. And I should actually I'll go through the goals, and then I'll maybe pass the mic over to our ad hoc members if they would like to share any additional thoughts. So then the draft goals, we previously had 3 draft goals. We now actually have 4. So the 3 previously shown are largely unchanged. We still have the Vision Zero goal. We've still got a goal around building out the safe, seamless network. And then we've added goal number 3 is our new goal. What that seeks to do is really address the idea that we're not just building connections, but the connections we are building are well-maintained, beautiful, inviting, comfortable. So getting more to the kind of the amenities that we're providing, the idea that, street trees are improve walkability, trying to really address the physical characteristics of the public realm. And then goal 4, that's unchanged. That's everything else, kind of the catch-all for all the other ways we promote and support active transportation through education and encouragement activities. So I'll pause there if anyone from that ad hoc committee would like to add anything. And I'll actually even open it up if the committee wants to chime in on any or ask questions about any of these. Go ahead, Kelly.
I just wanted to note that we kind of stopped short on the 4th one, and are open to, we talked about maybe giving some examples of what does encouragement mean, and we just didn't really get to finish completing that one. So we're open to, I mean, feedback on all of them, but in particular, I think that one.
And I'm also curious what the rest of the committee thinks about the 4 goal areas. Does it feel, are we moving in the right direction with this new goal that now addresses something that wasn't there before, which is really kind of the maintenance and the beauty of our streets?
Really quick, Bjorn, I'll just call out the context piece you mentioned at the beginning. Yeah, it was totally out of scope for what we were doing, but it really is a really strong piece that sets what the plan is and how it relates to transit. And we call out all those connections. I think we actually got to the meat of some of the things that I brought up at our last meeting when I said we should form an ad hoc. That context piece really hits on a lot of those in a great way. And it also has some guiding principles, I think, for how we see active transport in the city. This is one of the few written documents that's going to get to the ethos of active transport. So I think it lays out some really great principles and things like that. And then I think adding that item about kind of the aesthetics and utility of the trail network also hit on that. So I'm really curious to hear what the rest of the committee thinks.
Also something that you can noodle on, and we're going to bring this back each month with an update, and so no
I was
need
going
to
to say, we're not
yeah.
done yet.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, this was really just a status update.
I will add that I just really like how this feels. Like, this feels like a really good momentum. This is much better like vision than what we had started with, and I feel like it's hitting the most important parts in a prioritized way. And I like normalize and celebrate. It feels like Petaluma to me. Like it sort of like the type of like edge and kind of, I feel like Petaluma is a celebratory town, and I like that that's a part of it too. Thank you guys for your work on this.
I'd say that I think it's on the right path.
Agreed. I really like the new goal. I think it's a big part of selling changes to the community is beautifying their neighborhoods. And then on the vision, my one thought was maybe change it from empowered to excited to. Last sentence or last line, feel excited to use active transportation.
I also like how aspirational it's sounding now. I think it does reflect the community better. It's not a sterile kind of a statement any longer. It seems like it's got a little life to it, and I think that reflects what we're aiming towards. So I think it's a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, very excited about it also. I think not sure where it fits, but I want to be able to make the case or make the point that it's cost saving by biking to get your groceries rather than driving, and
the equity factor.
Yeah, the equity factor, but the economic just frugality. I don't know, something that to kind of get to the point. It's a motivation that I have of just limiting our family to one car and trying to get as much done. So somehow kind of integrating that in could be, I think, helpful.
And maybe climate friendly.
Yeah, that's a separate track, I think.
Sorry.
Yeah, but no worries. That's put it to the same point. There's other benefits that come from having this world-class active living city. I'm glad it's helpful context to say that was in the future, because it's like, it's very aspirational. I definitely want to get there where we're known for other things besides just banning gas stations. So yeah, excited to get there.
Bjorn, I don't know if you want to mention, and I'm struggling to remember what the title was, but we bulleted out and we talked about cost savings. We talked about physical health, mental health. We talked about all those benefits that would be included in the introductory. There's just a lot of stuff we worked on that isn't here too, but what you're talking about was going to be included, right?
Yeah, sort of a section with with the benefits of all the different benefits of active transportation. Yep. Not necessarily called out in the vision statement, though. There's a lot. I mean, there are so many benefits, but I'm looking at the ad hoc committee members. We can certainly take this back. I've heard the two things that we don't have in there are climate and sort of the equity or financial side of walking and biking. So,
is it possible to share too what the other stuff is that we've created in draft to see if committee members think that might address? I mean, I'm not opposed to adding more to the vision statement, but
yeah, let's see. We have so in the benefits. I don't have it up right in front of me right now, but
I'm in an email. That's okay.
Okay, yeah, by email. Yes, we can do that. Yep.
Yeah, and I think those discussions are going to be ongoing because we did the same thing. Like I wanted a lot of things in our goals, but then it's trying to separate kind of goals and some of these other, whereas goals are something that will have very tangible measurables that we'll be looking for policy-wise. Like will we achieve certain percentages or how will we measure our progress towards it? And so things that we thought were, massive benefits or advantages that didn't necessarily have a tangible set of goals, we kind of made these sections to kind of fit those in there, call them out, and then focus in on things we can really measure effectively. But yeah, I think this is really good feedback for us to kind of keep thinking about that and kind of how to organize those.
Okay, great. Sorry. Committee Member Garcia.
Just looking for other inspiration online for how to generate some potential ideas for goal settings. We were just looking at Chat GPT as maybe another way to look into some ideas. That's all.
That's not something that I have used yet, but if you're suggesting that we should write our vision statement using ChatGPT.
Don't make us all superfluous.
No, I am not suggesting that for the record.
It's already done.
Maybe you can share that with me, with us, whatever it is that AI came up with for us. All right, I will move on to our other ad hoc committee that working on the project map. That's Pamela, Nicole, and Adam. And admittedly, I haven't had much for them to do yet because we're still sorting through the 350 comments that were received through Social Pinpoint and working to incorporate all of that feedback as we revise the map for the September 25th workshop. Some of the things we have discussed as a group, though, so they will, I will loop them in to review that map before it's finalized, make sure that they feel that, documenting all of the feedback that has been incorporated and changes that have been incorporated. And then we talked about how to simplify the map so that it's just a little bit more, just easier to understand and provide feedback on. We got a lot of great feedback on the map, the Social Pinpoint map. So what we are proposing to do is at that September 25th workshop, only show our proposed network at full build out. So not expecting members of the public to differentiate between existing infrastructure and proposed infrastructure. It's just one snapshot. The year is 2050. We've built everything. Here's what it looks like. And then, get consensus on that vision for our network. And then we can, work, kind of go backwards from that and figure out what the actual projects are. And then also simplifying the bikeway classifications, and really only showing 3 categories. Our on-street bike facilities, so that would include bike lanes, protected bike lanes, neighborhood greenways, so those are, you know, shared lanes on calmer, slower streets, and then multi-use trails. The reason that I'm suggesting we only show one type of facility for on-street bike lanes is because our goal with this plan, it's very clear, you know, given the feedback we received through Social Pinpoint, what we've heard from PBAC, just the direction with best practices, that if we're going to be implementing bikeways, they need to, you know, we should do everything we can to make them safe and accommodating for people of all ages and abilities. So clearly outlining that in the plan as well, that, you know, there are certain thresholds for vehicle traffic, you know, in terms of volume and speed, that would necessitate an on-street protected bike lane, for example. So again, not putting the burden on the public to say, oh no, this street needs a protected bike lane, this street you know, needs a buffered bike lane. Just showing that as one line type, and then again with the understanding that as part of the framework of the plan, that we would be seeking to implement all ages and abilities bikeways everywhere. So those were kind of that's the quick update on the map. Not sure if for our ad hoc folks, anything else to capture, or from the rest of the committee, any questions or comments on that?
I think, could you just clarify, this is super bike centric because it's easier for us to connect like the pedestrian gaps
Right.
and things like that, but we really needed to focus this part on the bike network, right?
No, we will have, there are pedestrian components as well. Yeah, the bike, that exercise of mapping out the bike network is much more involved because there are more design considerations with the bike network than there are with a pedestrian network. But no, we will still have, you know, we'll identify intersections where crossing improvements are needed or other improvements are needed. Obviously, the multi-use trail system, that's all pedestrian infrastructure as well. We do have a map of sidewalk gaps that Fair and Pierce prepared. So that's something that we can bring to the workshop for input as we're trying to identify any gaps that we're missing, because it's well within the realm of possibility that in a city with 400 miles of streets that we may have missed a few sidewalk gaps. So that's one thing we'll want to get out of it, but also understanding, you know, priorities from people for those sidewalk gaps, or even just identify. There were a lot of comments on the Social Pinpoint around crosswalks, either creating new crosswalks or improving existing crosswalks. So that's all definitely important. But as far as, you know, when you look at the map, like when you look at what we had on Social Pinpoint, what really jumps out is the bike network, and that is a very involved mapping exercise that we are in the midst of. Everyone feel good about the kind of the change in the map symbology? Does that feel easier to grasp? Awesome. So next up, just want to quickly pivot to the prioritization conversation. You may recall that we had Allison from Fair and Pierce come in May and present on some possible scoring criteria that would be used. Basically, we would attach data to each of the proposed projects in the plan, and then this criteria would form the basis for how those projects are ranked and prioritized. The areas that Allison presented at that meeting were equity, connectivity and accessibility, safety, and safety. And then she had an explanation for sort of the environmental and sustainability piece, just that's embedded within all of the projects inherently because of the vehicle miles traveled or the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from transportation associated with increased walking and biking. So the feedback, this is just a high-level summary of the feedback that we got from you all at that meeting. We heard overall support for those categories of equity, connectivity, and safety. There was a concern from or not a concern, but a desire from the committee to see geographic equity incorporated to ensure that all of the neighborhoods have adequate walking and biking connections. That's something really that we can actually address more in the implementation plan, where we could, we could use council districts, for example, and we could pull out the top scoring projects for each of the council districts or figure out some other ways to show that coverage and distribution of projects. There were a lot of comments around figuring out how to incorporate delivery method, just the idea that that some projects maybe should be prioritized if they're easier to implement, because we can get more done with less money and in less time and make more progress towards building out our network. That's also something that Jeff will touch on in the implementation plan. And then we also heard, one piece that was really missing from the scoring criteria was public feedback. There was really no, if you go back here, there's really no input there for projects that have been identified by PBAC or our local road safety plan or other community groups as priority projects. So we wanted to incorporate that as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff. He's going to take it from here and talk through the latest revision to the criteria.
Thanks. Good setup there. So this is intended to show the categories, the metrics with which we can really easily quantify based on how we've mapped everything, and then kind of talk through the process of how the quantifiable metrics then turn into prioritization and weighting to actually determine that prioritized list. And also talk a little bit about the implementation plan approach. Hopefully hope to get feedback on both pieces separate, but in the picture of they kind of happen in sequence. So we broke the proposed prioritization criteria factors or categories that are similar to what were presented last time or discussed: equity, community support, safety, connectivity, and proximity to things that we want to prioritize, whether they're proxies for densification or specific places like community centers, schools, et cetera, and transit. Next. Advanced. So some of the relatively easy elements that can quantify factors to quantify these factors include details like for equity, looking at the mapping of the disadvantaged communities mapping as part of the general plan effort. That's information that we have, and it's not something that has to be additional work. It's just a matter of either it is or it isn't in those areas. Community support, it's evidence of public support. That's something we would love to hear your thoughts on, but that could be actual comments in the ATP process. It could be comments received and documented as part of the local road safety plan, the general plan, and any other past, present, or future community engagement platforms. The intent is that this is kind of a living document. So as different ideas or projects or community support is provided, there's a mechanism with which that's collected and then feeds into the ever-changing prioritization based on a variety of factors. Safety, some of those elements are specifically looking at the high injury network, and which is the maps that we developed as part of the baseline existing conditions piece, whether they are on the high injury network or if they cross the high injury network, and maybe weighting things separately based on whether it's on or connected to, kind of feeding towards kind of a safer, more connected network. Connectivity is another piece of looking where there are gaps or barriers and what projects actually seek to break down those barriers or close those gaps. A lot of the intersections that have kind of less than ideal or less than safe or less than comfortable bike and ped connections are a good example for where those would be scored on those pieces. Looking at the LTS maps, the level of traffic stress maps, and where there are level of traffic stress of 3s and 4s without parallel routes that are better and more comfortable, which are level of traffic stress 1 and 2, and weighting those that would actually have a benefit towards that low stress network. And then looking at actually the proximity to places of interest, schools, community centers, whether it's retail, commercial, or other land uses, local and regional serving retail or transit centers and bus stops, and actually being able to potentially we have a lot of that mapped, so we can actually weight it relatively easily. And then next slide. Kind of the missing pieces, which we don't necessarily have to talk through tonight, but that we will have that chance to talk about, is how do we assign points to all of these things and the weight of those points. So it's basically, is it a yes, no? Is it a 1 through 5? There's a couple different ways of doing it. And then how much does that each thing weight the overall score of a project? At the onset, our approach was to actually have the weight be adjustable. So give staff the opportunity to have a point, and if there's a grant opportunity that prioritizes, bike and ped crossings within 500 feet of schools, that the weight for the things that are proxy for that can be adjusted, reprioritized, and then the staff is more readily available to seek that funding as an example of how that's kind of adjustable over time. But the points, whether you're within that proximity to school or not, is known. So it's kind of the finite piece, or something that can be quantifiable. So that's kind of generally that's the kind of proposed prioritization in categories. It's not that we can add more, but by adding more, it's just going to make it more complex and dilute some of the really easily quantifiable metrics that speak to a lot of the objectives that we've talked through. Did you want to stop here and talk through this, or move into the implementation?
Yeah, it might be easier to just pause for some questions and feedback from the committee. Yeah. Doing it kind of unconventionally, but that's because we've got a lot of different sections to this. So
maybe I'll jump in real quick. So just to clarify, for the safety aspect along the high injury network, I'm just trying to understand the distinction if there was a process done by the city versus the Sonoma County's Vision Zero high injury network, high injury intersections, and just understanding how those interrelate.
Yeah, so SCTA had a county-wide high injury network that included corridors and streets or intersections. We used that as one of the inputs as kind of the basis for what we did, which is we looked at all the specific documented crashes within the city, and then applied a little bit more of a qualitative approach on understanding where the gaps in the county's high injury network are. But in reality, it's a continuous high injury network. So if anything, it was more of a fine-tuned sensitivity to identifying a longer continuous stretch of roadway to be part of the high injury part of a high injury corridor. It's a lot of the same data that the county used, with a little more recent, because this was after that. But I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is, I believe there was a couple blocks of D Street that weren't identified on the countywide. But knowing the history of crashes and the sentiment of it not being a very comfortable or safe place for people to walk or bike, we kind of tweak the sensitivity so that it was part of the high injury network. So it's prioritized for safety.
Okay, great. That might be the street that I live on, so that's very helpful. And then the other question, I guess, was maybe just an idea for a suggestion around scoring for connectivity. Of just thinking about when you add in this gap closure, what is then the new kind of total continuous mileage that you're now completing, for instance? I know you're going to be brainstorming all of those, but just to throw that in the mix.
That's actually the travel shed analysis is one way we've described that. We did it as part of the crosstown connectors work, where when you close a gap, how big does the catchment area or the distance with which somebody can walk or bike within a certain distance? We did the same thing, just using existing, if you're at City Hall, what's the distance you can walk or bike in 15 minutes, and it changes as you add projects. So there's a couple different ways to approach that. I think we're going to try to find a way that's really easy to quantify using all the GIS data that we've mapped with the projects, and then we can use that approach to really test what the initial results of how the scoring and weighting works to make sure that the right what we understand to be priority projects are actually scoring where we would expect them to be, and make sure that the weights are kind of in a good first crack as part of the initial draft back to you all.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I really like it. The community support, I could see how that one's a little awkward, and I think I've probably been some of the biggest proponents of including that. It feels like the pieces that I don't see in here are like speed and cost, and like the things that to me make for a project getting done quickly, which is speed, cost, and public support. It's like a feasibility thing, right? And so I'm just wondering if maybe we can tweak that one to where it takes into account of like, how fast can we get something done, relative to like the cost of it and like the potential for backlash or a lot of support.
A lot of that's kind of, that'll speak to the implementation approach that's in the following slide. I think what we want to do is keep the known quantities as part of the scoring piece, because ease of implementation, there's a lot of inputs to that that we didn't want to muddy up, so that the easier GIS quantifiable metrics, just to make this a lot more dynamic to rescore over time. But that, what you described is what we commonly refer to as like ease of implementation is on the following implementation piece.
This might be more logistical. I'm looking at the presentation right now, and I'm having slightly different slides. The table I'm showing I'm on number 10, or page 10 of the presentation from online. I actually really like that table layout. Was this an older version that I have, or a newer?
You have the Excel version probably. This is a PowerPointed one that can be more easily read. So so there is a more detailed one that uses full sentences and actual quantities for these details. And these are more, less quantifiable. But that's what there is a deeper methodology that will go into detail in all of these. That'll be part of the.
I like the Excel spreadsheet. That says something about me. I do like that, and I like the metrics pointed out. And I was thinking about a way to shoehorn trees or something like that in here, but I think that really that doesn't go in the prioritization. That's just an overall design feature that gets baked into projects moving forward.
Can I just provide an example for those that don't have that aren't seeing the Excel table? One example of this proximity to locations of interest, it talks through whether it's 500 feet, quarter mile, half mile to schools, and weighting it accordingly. 1, 2, 3 points, or 1, 5, 10, or things like that. And it's a lot of kind of internal discussions about how it would quantify. Which, if we're generally okay with the approach, that would be the next layer to it, so that folks in the community and all of you would also be able to weigh in on that as well. So I just want to make sure that it's not like looking behind the curtain. It's just smaller text that we couldn't fit in this PowerPoint presentation.
And I'm to blame for that because I published the PowerPoint yesterday, and then today it was updated. So it's more readable now. So we'll update the agenda after the meeting with this version of the PowerPoint. Cool. Move on to the implementation.
Yeah. So in the prioritization piece, that's more of, again, quantifying things that are easily known, that are binary, the yes, no's, either it is or it isn't. What the implementation plan is, kind of once that's all been scored, really understanding that the different projects can be implemented in different ways, on different tracks, with different inputs, with different resources and tools needed. And that speaks to how is it built? Does it require additional study? What's the kind of design or environmental clearance that's needed, et cetera. So this is kind of a visualization of the implementation approach that we're going to describe in the report, and kind of will end up resulting in buckets of implementation strategies that the city can then use to more readily. It's like, oh, we have a project that's boom, boom, boom. We can set it up one way versus the other. So we're going to have a big project list. There's well over 100 projects, discrete projects in the map itself. Once we have that project list and it's been vetted with you all and the city, then we will then kind of look at different categories of improvements. So these are just these are suggestions. There'll likely be more, but the ones that we identified were short-term installation or quick build opportunities, things that can be done with very very easily implemented. Doesn't change parking, doesn't change number of travel lanes. Things that have a low likelihood of being challenged because it's really just maybe it's adding posts where there isn't already, or better striping or something like that. Leveraging city programs is another bucket. There's the CIP list, the paving rehabilitation program, and identifying and matching up those corridors with corridors that have projects on them and understanding how those can be implemented as part of that. Third one are what we kind of refer to as grant magnets, projects that kind of check all the boxes of the scoring criteria. That are, there's quite a bit of federal money out there for projects that are within an active transportation plan and a local road safety plan, for example, and there are quite a few there. So just understanding, identifying that those are very easy to implement because they've been vetted through all these other adopted plans. Fourth bucket that we identified here is more of like the long-term capital projects, the projects that in previous plans may have said, oh, we want to re-envision East Washington, but we don't know exactly how to do it. It's identifying a way to actually take that next step for those types of projects so that maybe it is a 5 to 10 year project, but there's something that we need to do now as soon as this plan's adopted to move towards that. So it's not just a project that's too big to worry about because we have all these others. It's its own track of project or of study. Next slide. Then it's kind of applying the resources, tools, and policies and elements that are needed to make each of those tracks be successful. Understanding there are objective design standards that the city's developing. There's policies in the general plan. There are in the industry best practices related to complete streets practices. All of that stuff feeds into a combination of things needed to move all of these projects forward, and identifying that in a way that really kind of individualizes those buckets or tracks. And lastly, it's harder to read, but it's basically identifying that each kind of bucket has its own implementation process, and that there's the same project can be in multiple priority lists, but there are certain quick build priority projects. There may be priority corridors to study. There might be priority roadways that are getting repaved in the next 3 years that need to be ensured that they don't that they take full advantage of those monies to be implemented. So just understanding that it's kind of not just one implementation plan; it's multiple strategies with which to put it in. So that's kind of my quick run through of our approach. Happy to answer any questions or get suggestions to make it better as well.
And thanks, Jeff. I'll just add that how, kind of on the staff side, how this is amazing, because how we would use this is we'd basically, maybe come to PBAC once a year at least and say, all right, here are our top priority projects that are going to be addressed through upcoming paving projects. Here are the really capital intensive projects like that new section of River Trail that isn't going to be built through a development project where we know we need to go after grant funding, those types of projects. Here's what we have budgeted for quick build projects. Here are our top 10 quick build projects that we can do this year. So just creating a really nice work plan where we're basically moving down the list and taking advantage of all the different types of projects that we can implement and funding sources that we can pursue. And hopefully just make it much easier for you all and for the public to kind of keep track of what's on the horizon. Sounds good. All right. Yeah.
What's an initiative? What's an example of an initiative in the toolbox?
And anything that's established through a policy or an event that's prioritized, that's another catalyst for garnering community support or city commitment to doing things. Anything that is a leg of the stool that will help move things forward. The PCAC process is a good example of when maybe it's not an initiative as it is a a planning effort, but that has catalyzed or uncovered the need to really focus on certain parts of the city, but also folks and groups that are historically been underrepresented. So using that as, maybe it's something that goes into a grant application or a mechanism with which to go back to the community and get more support or more detail from them. So it's really just catalyzing all the great, the city thread report and all of the other kind of community-led planning efforts as well, as just one, a lot of legs to that stool.
Jeff, I was jumping ahead. No, I was looking at the schedule here. I was just curious. It's October 30th. The draft is coming to PBAC. Does that mean we have time to submit comments to you until December? And then you're revising it?
Maybe we can walk through this and then we it may answer the question, but I think we can talk through that. The answer is all comments are great, and we'll fold them in as soon as we can. I think we have been actively developing the report content. I think the additions that you all have made have been welcome additions as well. Bjorn and I are trading text back and forth, so there's stuff being generated. It's just not polished quite yet. I think the big next piece is getting the community input as part of the end of September. We already have the digital version. We want to get some more in-person version. We'll layer in some of the PCAC findings as well as part of that. And then in both October and November, during the PBAC meetings, there will be updates similar to tonight where we touch on a bunch of different things, updates to what we're doing, as well as another layer to the onion, if you will. In terms of some draft conclusions or recommendations or some of the list of programs. Not fully sure what is going to be ready in those, but it's going to be a standing meeting agenda item that Bjorn and I will be talking with and getting feedback from you all. The document preparation in the October, November is more of the administrative function of putting it all into one document, making sure that city staff of different departments has a chance to review it, so that is ready, so that the internal city family has had a chance to review it and comments have been provided and incorporated, so that when it starts going outside of the city family, there aren't things that later city departments will then take out. That's kind of the general the ethos there. And then so November, December is more of when that kind of just gets refined. We iterate with the city as well a little bit. And then the PBAC reviews draft in December is more of that the intent, and Bjorn, stop me if is that it would be the draft version would be available to you all before that, and that would be when we are discussing questions, comments, concerns about the content itself. Rather than presenting, the last 3 years worth of work back to you, it's more of giving you a chance to kind of highlight the big stuff that we can kind of talk through as a group as well, with the idea that that's then going to iterate again, and then with gearing up for January, February for Planning Commission and ultimately city adoption. Realizing there's steps every month to iterate it through that. I don't know, Bjorn, if there's anything from the city that you wanted to add.
Just that there's, there's flexibility here. This is, I would say, kind of a best case scenario or maybe the most ambitious timeline that we could put forward right now. That being said, if, we hear at the September 25th community workshop that we are nowhere close with the project map and we have a lot of work left to do to fix that, there could be additional engagement opportunities added to the schedule. Likewise, with the draft plan when it comes to PBAC, if there are major concerns or things that it's missing that aren't simple revisions, we'll go back to the drawing board. So just want to kind of reassure people that this is definitely not something that we are going to try to rush or push through, and we do want your buy-in is obviously very important. It's not going to go past PBAC to Planning Commission until you all feel really good about the plan. So.
Did that answer your question?
That it does answer my question. I think it feels good. I'm just thinking about how we can do outreach to really let people know that they can also provide input at the PBAC meetings. I know we have our like community bulletins, but maybe just extra like attention to social media, et cetera, and really publicizing that opportunity.
Yeah, we can definitely work with our communications team to get that out there. And we also will, we do have, we'll get emails out to people who have signed up for updates on this as well.
Are there any committee comments?
One question.
Yes.
What's the outreach look like for bringing the community to the September 25th workshop? How do we feel about the potential turnout for that?
There's been, the fact that we had 350 comments on the social pinpoint, I think there's and I want to say, I don't know if you remember, Jeff, the number of unique commenters, but it was in the neighborhood of 100. So it's definitely a topic that people are engaged with. We have a lot of email addresses from people who have either engaged with the map or have signed up for updates, so we can reach out to that list. We've already gotten the word to our communications team to incorporate in all of their materials between now and then and get out on social and the various channels. So, but you all can definitely help us out and help spread the word. I'm happy I could send out a little flyer or something that you can circulate or post to social media. That'd be helpful. But and then obviously our friends in the community, Safe Streets Petaluma and other groups that can help mobilize their networks that are very much engaged in this. So I'm confident we'll get a good turnout, and we'll make all the materials available online as well for folks who can attend, and people can provide feedback that way.
Yeah, thank you for posing that question. It was making me think of some non-traditional actors, I guess, that would be great to have at this as well, and some traditional too, I guess. Obviously schools, some special outreach to them. I think we probably have a list of kind of the major employers. Also, who knows how many people live and work in Petaluma that are there, but I think that could be helpful. And then the one that I can't quite get my head wrapped around, but feel like is important, would be shopping center land owners. That's not a really demographic we can target, but just in terms of thinking about how to connect that, the bicycle path to the shopping destination. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and I think, like we've talked about, Bjorn, that's private property, so how do we exactly kind of anticipate and try to help some of those needs? But I don't have an answer for that, but just a suggestion, that's all.
Any other comments? I have 2 public comments. Bruce Hagan.
Find out all of the things that are going on with this effort. I was keeping myself in the dark, but this is very encouraging. I thought I'd just tell you briefly what we're doing with Safe Streets Petaluma is doing with City Thread, and Bjorn's been very involved with this. But the idea there is how do we take this list of projects and the things that flow out of the priority list, and how do we get them done fast? How do we get 5 miles or the equivalent of 5 miles built in the next year? And if 25 is the number, or if we determine there's some other number, or some other very solid, visible, SMART goal, if you will, metric that we can pursue. And what I, in fact, was just editing here and promised earlier today in my email was a sign-on statement that we could take out to the shopping center owners, to the downtown merchants, to all of the interest groups in Petaluma to get them to at least understand and not oppose what we're doing, preferably to sign on to it and show up when they need to show up, so that anybody who doesn't like this particular design will sort of half-heartedly, embarrassingly make their request, but they know that they're up against the greater interests of the entire community. And that's what will allow the processes that we come up with to do stuff more quickly, where it's checklisted, where it's templated, where we do the same thing over and over and over again, not try to reinvent it with each new project. That'll allow us to get in 3 years, this rather large number that has been achieved in all these other communities that City Thread has worked with. So if any of you, again, I invite you to take a look at probably 5 minutes worth of an email thread that I sent you earlier. And we are the Safe Streets Petaluma group, which will probably get reincarnated as Petaluma Safe Streets Coalition. The intent was to be a coalition of all of the people who are interested in expanding mobility choices and not just the bicyclists. That will be able to help implement this plan in record time. So again, thank you for your time and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Jessica Moses.
I'll make my comment quick, just regrettably letting you guys know that September 25th is Yom Kippur. So not great planning for the Jewish community, and would encourage city staff to put Jewish holidays on the calendar. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Passover all have pretty significant evening activities. And to just please keep working with the communications team so that those who aren't able to attend events sort of know where the opportunities are to give feedback in a meaningful way. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Next is committee comments. I don't know. Brian, do you have something? I don't know if I have an order for this.
Bike racks are needed at 2-Niner Diner.
Terry.
Give a quick update from planning. Our last meeting that we had in planning, we reviewed a project, the infamous Cattleman's Becoming Chick-fil-A project. I think that site presented a lot of challenges with bike imped infrastructure and VMT issues that got raised at that site, and some other adjacent topics like excessive parking, like tree coverage. And I actually had a pretty good meeting afterwards with our city attorney and our planning department manager, our planning manager, Andrew Triple, talking about how important objective design standards are going to be in the future looking at these kinds of projects, because right now we're limited in what we can ask of a private property holder, what we can ask of an applicant in conditions of approval for certain things like parking, because we don't have a maximum limit. So we kind of have to have their buy-in to push some of these forward in a way. And some other things like supporting certain amount of bike and ped infrastructure. So I thought it was an interesting project. It wasn't as much of a nightmare, I think, as some people were bracing for design-wise. I think overall, a lot of things, there was a SPAR meeting, so we were doing the site plan and architectural review. But yeah, I was, of course, now that I'm on PBAC, keeping my hat on, looking at bike and ped, and we're going to be presented with sites like that present a really big challenge about placement and what we can actually do. And so I don't think we had a lot of options. We clearly didn't hit it out of the park with some revolutionary thing, but it's something I'm going to be thinking about moving forward, and we'll love to hear from this group on challenging sites, what can be done and what potential linkages there are and things of that nature. So yeah, that's the update.
Then we can move to staff comment. During staff comment, staff will provide brief updates relevant to this committee. Dialogue between members and staff should be limited to clarifying questions and answers.
All right, thank you. I can sense some fatigue, so we'll try to make this very quick. Two quick capital project updates. Garfield Drive, paving on Garfield Drive and North McDowell is complete. However, the associated striping work, not the case. So the striping on Garfield is expected in the fall. A good portion of the striping work on North McDowell has been done. However, we have given them a change order to add a lot of other enhancements, including green paint at all of the conflict zones, driveways, intersections, adding bike boxes at the signalized intersections, and those would actually be on the minor street approaches. So what we are encouraging there is if you are biking on North McDowell and you want to make a left turn, to instead do it in 2 stages. Go use the bike box. So for example, if you're riding southbound on North McDowell towards Corona, you want to make a left on Corona, we would encourage you to use that green, go wait in the bike box on Corona, then wait for Corona to get a green and then cross. Just a much safer, easier movement to make than trying to get across 2 lanes of traffic on North McDowell. So that's our approach to that. We also are adding vertical posts to all of the sections on North McDowell that have buffered bike lanes. So those will technically become class 4s once they have those vertical posts in them. That's, I believe, about 70% of the project. It's all but the section between Scott Street, so Hen House, Lagunitas area, and Corona. Unfortunately, that was the most constrained section where we didn't have those additional 2 feet on both sides to provide the buffer. But everywhere else we have the buffer, is getting the posts. So those are, it's what we're hearing is that all of those items, green paint and the vertical posts, have pretty long lead times right now. So hopefully those are in sooner than later, but even as of today, I couldn't get a commitment to a timeline on those. So some additional updates on projects that are in the planning and design phases. We did issue an RFP for a study of bike ped crossings of 101. And the four locations that we included in the RFP were Corona Road, the Rainier Avenue undercrossing, Lynch Creek Trail at North McDowell Boulevard, and also the Mackenzie Avenue overcrossing. So those would involve, the study would involve sort of a high-level concept plan, study and concept plan for each of the locations, and then possibly digging in or developing more detailed designs and looking at right-of-way and developing some cost estimates for the potential projects associated with each of those locations. And that's grant funded through Measure M from SCTA. I finally got the order for 76 bike racks in. I had to scale it down a little bit to match our funding availability, but excited to get those ordered. They should be delivered within the next month or two, and then our crews will take them and start installing them throughout the fall and winter as they have time and availability, which is great. Still, very much open through the bike parking request form that's been shared with you all. But we've got a lot of locations already identified downtown. I hear there's a need at the 2-Niner Diner. And then obviously as I've said many times, I'm considering personally installing the ones out here at City Hall because I hate that rack so much. And then let's see, Lynch Creek Trail, was excited. Ken's doing some great work there, working with a consultant, and they've initiated design work for pavement rehabilitation from North McDowell to the Lynch Creek Bridge. So that's the section, it's an asphalt section of the Lynch Creek Trail that's got a lot of cracking issues. So he's working with a consultant to figure out the best way to rehabilitate that pavement and make sure that the next layer we put on doesn't suffer the same cracking. And then also designing separately through a separate project the section from the Payran access point to Edith Street. So that would complete all of the paving from Water Street. Well, that would actually complete all paving on Lynch Creek Trail. And we're also talking about adding striping to the trail. So adding the white edge lines, dashed yellow lines in the middle to delineate the two directions of travel. We can bring all this stuff to PBAC for your review and feedback as it gets a little bit closer to reality. I know Ken is also working on the Maria Drive improvements, finalizing that design, hoping to go to bid soon on that project and targeting construction in 2024. And that has a bunch of utility and recycled water work that would precede it, and then hopefully the bulk of the paving work would happen next summer when school's out. We are having a community workshop on this is a new project, Howard Street improvements. This is another combined utility and paving project where we're replacing, I actually can't remember which utilities are being replaced. It's either sewer or water mains or both are being replaced, followed by complete pavement reconstruction from A Street to West Street. So that workshop is next Wednesday, right here, 6 p.m. And we've also got a survey up on the project webpage. So encourage you to go there and share some of your ideas for the corridor and priorities. Community announcements. I know the Blue Zones project has launched in Petaluma. I know they're holding a community workshop on the built environment. That's Tuesday the 19th at 6 p.m. And I apologize, the link was to a Google Doc, so I couldn't embed it. But that link, once this is added to the meeting page, I'll send you all an email, and that link will work. It'll be hyperlinked. And then, as we heard from Dave Alden, the Better Cities Film Festival has 2 screenings this month on Wednesday the 20th, Thursday the 28th. There is a nice usable link, urbanchat.org/film-festival. And I know those are all films that are curated for people who are interested in, placemaking, walking, biking, architecture, all the stuff that you all love and that I love. So go check that out. Safe Routes to Schools, just a reminder that they have a interest list where you can sign up to be a bike champion, whether that involves you could lead a bike bus or bike train, walking school bus. There's a lot of different things you can do. And really, Safe Routes is trying to support parents who are interested in being more involved in walking and biking to their kids' schools. So last week they had a webinar on how to lead bike trains. So yeah, there's the kind of support they offer if you want to get involved in the school communities. And upcoming agenda items. So obviously, active transportation plan will be a standing agenda item for the next several months. We've got the objective design standards. I touched on that earlier. We're planning on, I think, having them come present that in October. We still on the list have to tackle the City Thread Accelerated Mobility Playbook, Bruce. And then we've got several other, these are just several items that have been on the docket for a while. So hopefully we can start chipping away at these each month. But appreciate your very detailed feedback on the 500 Hopper project tonight. And was glad that we were able to get that in. So that's my update for tonight. Happy to take questions.
Just one question. I think I had emailed you about this, Bjorn, was if if we'd ever received a presentation or could receive one about the work done on the Petaluma River Parkway, which I think was prepared for by the Friends of Petaluma River. They would go along, I think, kind of north of the Lynch Creek Bridge that you were describing. Just seemed like there was some interesting work there that I know they were wanting to come present to us, but we've got a long list already, so, but couldn't help myself. That's it.
That's a great suggestion. I will add that to the list. That
Okay.
would be really, that would be perfect for this.
Great.
Yeah, yeah.
So you talked about on the update with the bike lane on McDowell, and the example that you used was the left-hand turn at Corona. You talked about a two-stage left turn. So I was trying to picture that. So the expectation for a bike would not to be go into the left-hand turn lane, but to cross the street, and then basically turn left once you have a green light. at
Yeah,
Corona?
so if you, when you have a green on North McDowell, obviously Corona will have a stop. They'll have a red.
Yep.
So you would basically go position yourself in the bike box in front of the through traffic on Corona. So whatever.
Veer to the right into that box.
Yep. Yeah, so you're basically kind of going diagonally across the crosswalk.
Yeah.
And then hanging out in that bike box in front of whatever lane you need to be in to establish your position to continue on Corona.
Sure.
And then you wait for that green time, and then wait for that green.
Is there any? I mean, do we think that that's going to be intuitive for bikers, or I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to put signage. I know there was some commentary around wayfinding and that sort of thing, and it seems like an opportunity to maybe place some signage for that type of.
Yeah, I've looked for that signage. It's not standardized, but I think that's something we can have made for these installations. I like the suggestion. Because you're right. It's probably not intuitive yet. Hopefully, it's something that becomes more intuitive as we put more bike boxes in around town. People understand how to use them. Maybe something we can do too with some sort of educational video or just other outreach to let people know how to do it. Yeah. But should be much more comfortable than merging across 2 lanes of traffic on North McDowell.
Sure.
To make a left.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And if no one else has any comments, I'll just append, I forgot the meat of my liaison update. The Chick-fil-A project, SPAR, was approved with the conditions of 17 of the 170 parking spaces were converted to landscape parking spaces. Their minimum required was 63, so obviously it's a huge parking number, and according to planning staff, that was actually down from what was originally proposed. We also put in a condition of approval to focus at least 60% of their 93 trees they're planting to be native trees, and to focus on substituting ornamentals they had put in, like crepe myrtles, with more robust trees that offer more shade coverage. But overall, the site plan is going to demo the current Cattleman's, put a 4,000 square foot Chick-fil-A, and then another 5,000 square foot building next to the existing kind of two-tier building with the saddle shop. There's going to be another building in there, and they talked about working with a cannabis dispensary in that space. So yeah, I just wanted to give the meat of actually what happened. So thank you.
Thank you.
Unintentional, but yes, funny.
Okay. Thank you, Bjorn. Before everybody leaves, it doesn't look like there's any lights outside. Be very careful leaving.
Let me turn the lights on.
Well,
I have my flashlight.
Okay. Do you know about any lights, outside lights, Delana? Sorry.
Yo,
okay.
but outside too.
Yeah. Well.
And with that, we will adjourn the meeting at 9:54 p.m. Thank you.
Recording stopped.